If Zeus is the best top laner in the world, could be true. It's every day except every final, mate. I'm sick of that narrative. Like, homie, you've never been the best top laner in any final ever. What's this guy doing? Like, I'm so bored of seeing him turn up to finals. And remember, I'll just put this in context. He ain't playing Smeb and the shot. Bro, he's playing against Thorin. He's playing against Kingen. Like, right, this is going to be another episode of Summoning Insight with me and Monty here. No guests for this one. Then again, they just leave apparently anyway. What I've had to learn is I've actually become like someone who's jaded in relationships, you know. Why even bother getting a guest, Monty? They just leave anyway. It's just me and you at the end. So, you know,
just 10 years later, it's still just
reject society. Just start with just me and you. We don't need them, Monty. Thing is, we're like those guys, you know, they're all some esports after party. We're the ones in the comment. They don't even know they could have been on Summoning Insight in episode 2 or whatever, like segment 2, I guess. So obviously, as people will know, we are, of course, brought to you by the Freeze Pipe. But I like to keep it fresh and give you a new angle every time, guys. So I thought what we'd do is, I haven't actually told Monty how I'm going to do this, but what I told him was, we're going to test essentially his understanding of the Freeze Pipe by asking some questions where we do it in the style of the show Jeopardy. So what will happen is I will present a clue to which Monty must, in the style of a question, which identifies or names, explains what the thing would be. So the first clue is this, Monty: the food safe glycerin chamber. What would the question be?
What cools your smoke by over 300 degrees Fahrenheit?
That's correct. That is indeed the item within Freeze Pipe, which cools it. Yeah, so you see the format, right? Then the other question goes, avoid hot, irritating smoke when enjoying cannabis products.
That's just by taking a rip after freezing it. What is taking a rip after freezing it for an hour?
Indeed. Yeah, see, it's that easy, guys, to get to know Freeze Pipe and its different products and settings and features. Is that easy? But here's the thing. You need be in no jeopardy of getting hot, irritating smoke while you're enjoying it, or for that matter, being without a food safe glycerin chamber, which when placed into the freezer section for 1 mere hour can cool your weed smoke by over 300 degrees. Also, if depending on what way you like to smoke weed, through a bong, bobbler, dab or oil rig kit, they have them all on the website. They even have this one that's like the twin turbine one with a special water function. Obviously 420 is coming up, but of course, if you want to buy this product to help us out and support us, then use the code LFN for 10% off at thefreezepipe.com.
That's right. And also, we are going to be doing some special 420 content for you guys. And so what this means is that we need you to tweet at us and send us the most cringe esports content that you can find. Okay, so this could be from any esport in the history of esports. We've already
bonus
got
points if it's deep lore, though. If it's like some really old school stuff that reminds us of some bonus points for that, for sure.
Yeah, but bonus points if it's like, yeah, if there is some deep lore there, because we'll explain it. So I'm going to tell you what we're going to do. We are going to utilize our freeze pipes, and then we are going to watch this content together and record it and release it on this channel. So you will get our less than sober reactions to all of the cringe esports content. And we've done this without the freeze pipe component. We have done this in the past with like Breaking Point. If you guys remember the Team Liquid documentary, so don't send us that one. We did a couple of
the CLG documentary episodes, as well.
The CLG one. I don't think we did the ones like Chasing the Cup when CLG was.
No, we did the original one, if you remember, the one that was made by the guy who, like, I think it might even have been the guy who went and joined TSM later, but you know, like that guy who was like the Max Olivio guy. I think he was the one who did the really old school one from like season 3 or whatever it was, if you remember.
Yeah. So if you guys have any particular fond cringe esports memories, like we might do the Chasing the Cup from the Korean.
I mean, I already saw a fan in Twitch chat. There's a guy in Twitch that already said, like, don't worry, yes, submit it, but 100% we will definitely watch the clip about Loco Doco talking about snorting cocaine off J-Dong's erect penis. Like, I can go ahead without even having a tete-a-tete with Monty. I can agree that when high, we will watch a video of Loco Doco saying he wanted to snort Class A drugs off J-Dong's penis. By the way, if you don't know, guys, not only is that mental for the status of saying that, but also they're both Koreans. Like, if J-Dong heard that, he wouldn't just be like, wow, that's kind of a cool thing to say. He'd be like, what the fuck is wrong with Loco Doco? So we're definitely going to watch that. Don't worry. That I can already tell you that goes straight to the top of the pile.
Hotbid interview. Yes, the famous
straight to the top of the pile for that one. Sure.
We might do some of those old Carmack interviews as well.
Hey, if you want, guys, throw in like if you want to get a really old school Shocks interview, because you'll be shocked how different she is. Put that way, the really old school ones. Yeah, you'll be different for you. I'm telling you. So anything like that, anything people get springs to mind, just submit it to us, basically. How did they do it, by the way? Tweet at us or something?
Tweeted us. Just tweeted us. Tweeted us. There'll be a Last Free Nation tweet as well. So
Yes.
we'll start compiling those and going through them. You have to do it in the next 5 days, though, as from the recording of this video. So 4 days. We are going to be doing it on the Sunday, the 16th of April is when we're going to be doing this. So, and we'll release it on 420. So there you go. We will thank you for sending us that content.
Which, by the way, as an aside, technically, I believe, Monty, the next episode of Some of the Insight will also be on 420 because it moves to the Thursday instead. Remember?
It will. Yes, it will.
We won't be high for that, though, guys. The videos will be released that day. We won't actually be high ourselves live on the stream.
Yeah, 8 a.m. is a little early for me for that. Maybe later in the day, though. But yeah, now's the time to get your freeze pipe, get it delivered before 420. Treat yourself to some nice glass, and we will provide some extra entertaining content. Thank you very much to the Freeze Pipe for sponsoring us. And also, guys, remember that the single best way that you can support us is by patronizing our sponsors if they have a product that you enjoy. And who doesn't enjoy the Freeze Pipe? All right. Let's talk.
So much we can talk about all these finals.
Okay. We have so much to talk about, especially from history. So as of this last week, it was Faker's 10-year anniversary in League of Legends. So I figured we might be able to do a little check with our esports historian here about the legacy of his career and comparing it to some other esports greats.
It was cool as a tribute. He also didn't win the spring split 10 years later. So already
that's right. That's fair. Yeah.
There you go.
He'll win summer though if history repeats itself. If history repeats itself, he got third, I believe, in the spring split of his first split. So we can talk about that and the origin of Faker. Obviously, Bjergsen's retirement is another huge topic to discuss. And then on top of all of that, we did have LCK Finals, LCS playoffs. We're really deep in LPL playoffs right now. For you LEC fans, we may lightly touch on that, but we've got a couple more weeks of LEC, so I think we're probably going to focus on some of this other stuff that is more
also for tomorrow's Best Damn League show. I've got a guest, so we're going to go deep on that one. Don't worry.
Yeah. So you will get your LEC fix from Last Free Nation. It just may not be on this show today because we do have all these other issues.
You start with LCK then.
You want to start with that instead of
because here's the thing, Monty. There's good and there's bad here. Like we can do the Faker side if you want to do the positive. There's some pretty bad stuff. Like I think we've got some pretty scathing topics on the T1 angle we're gonna have to get into. But let's do the good part first then. So here's Faker's 10-year anniversary. He did almost win another championship 10 years later, which by the way is almost unthinkable longevity. I mean, I even said on Twitter, look, if you want to spin the positive, mate, just to be in 14 domestic finals, like I think I said on Twitter, bro, that like just sounds impossible. Never mind the idea someone's gonna match it. Like, spoiler, nobody will ever match that record. Like, I don't think people realize how many years you have to play. 14 finals. That is, and by the way, he's won most of them. He's won like 8 or something, right? Hasn't he? So like, that's unthinkable. Like that, just to even be in that many is impossible. Doesn't that stat is actually staggering to me, even as I think about it now.
Yeah, and it's also that he's won the 3 Worlds titles as well. The next closest is 2, which it doesn't seem that far away, but considering how short most players' careers are and how hard it is to stay on top in League of Legends, that is pretty remarkable. I mean, he just as a player, I think, unfortunately for a lot of esports, and they haven't had necessarily the peak longevity that League of Legends has. Like League of Legends was the most popular esport in the world when Faker started his career. And it continues to be the most popular esport in the world as Faker continues his career 10 years later.
That part isn't a small detail, though, Monty. People forget, even the games like Quake and Counter-Strike that I'm a fan of, dude, they had highs and lows. Like, normally by the end, if you think of how StarCraft 2 now is, guys, StarCraft 2 is still going, but it's a tiny scene compared to what it was. And, like, if you're the guy who wins all the championships now in StarCraft 2, you will always wonder what would have happened if I'd have been at the top in 2013. If you're Faker, you never have to think about that. In fact, that's the coolest thing about League, isn't it? It sort of stayed at the top the whole time. It's never really had the drop-off.
Right. And I think that has affected, obviously, players in other esports. So one of the things that, we can say is like the early, like the first bourgeois boxer was not lasting necessarily 10 years at the peak level of competition in Brood War. He was pretty quickly overtaken. Like within that 10-year time span, from basically the start of Boxer 10 years later, we had Flash on top. So there was a period, there were lower periods of dominance. And I think what's remarkable about Faker is that 10 years later, he has made and won he's made the finals in the last 3 finals, right? And he's won 1 of them, lost 2 of them, but he's still on top. And part of that is excellent team building that T1 has had, access to some of the best rookies. Like, it's difficult at some points to separate the legacy of Faker from the legacy of T1, because T1 itself, being the most prestigious brand in esports history and the most prestigious team, was always able to draw the good free agents, to draw the good rookie players into its program. They've had a lot of money due to their success, and they have a lot of money now due to the partnership that they have with Comcast. So he has had pretty good systemic advantages, but he himself has also maintained his level of play. And sure, he's had ups and downs over the years, but he appears to be back in extremely good form, except for maybe this playoff series where he had some pretty big issues. But over the course of the regular season, he was really quite extraordinary again. And even if I don't personally agree that he was the best mid laner in the LCK this split, I think he was unquestionably top 3. And certainly in the conversation, it's not egregious to consider him the best mid laner in the LCK. So it really is just remarkable to watch this guy's entire career. And one wonders if other esports were able to kind of maintain that peak and maintain that level of viewership, what would have happened? And like, maybe we will see that in Counter-Strike now. Like, it seems that Counter-Strike is such a stable scene that a player like Simple could potentially go 10 years. It's starting to feel like we might be able to start building these legacies for players.
I mean, here's the thing. I won't make a big tangent about it, but I actually reject the entire premise that people always build up like that about Simple. Like, here's the difference, guys. Faker wasn't the best player in the world 6 years in a row. Simple was the best player. And they're both team games. Like, that's the problem.
Yep.
I think the problem with the Faker one is this. Like, as you say, it's debatable if he's even the best at his position, never even mind in T1 in the whole world. Like, to me, the amazing thing about Faker is he has 2 careers. He had one career where he was the bona fide star, the best player, your hard carry if you have the meta. And then the next second half of his career was this like team game approach where you put the right players around me. And it's like you say, I don't have to be the best. I've got to be just good enough that then all my experience kicks into play and that'll help us all win. Essentially, Faker's the super vet now in T1 for the last couple of years, isn't he? So, like, I agree. The cool thing to me, it's what I've always said about League is it's one of the first games where I actually feel like I got sort of like the true sporting experience of following someone. Like, because as I say, there's no equivalent to that in sports. Like, there's no sport I was watching where it was huge, but then my favorite player had to play when it was a tenth as big, and maybe people didn't care anymore. And there was, there's none of that crap. Whereas esports, as you say, it really is more like you get like 3 or 4 really good years of an esport game, and then it's like if you were there too early, you didn't get any money, and there wasn't enough tournaments to play in like the early days, or you're there at the end, and there might be a whole bunch of tournaments, but all the prestige is gone, and you don't have the big stadium events. The coolest thing about League is you actually get to see, essentially, with this generation of players, Faker, Deft, how good actually can you be if it's just you're the only variable? There's always enough pro play, there's always enough, there's regions, like all that aspect. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool. Because that's the other thing, mate. When we talk about longevity normally, half the time it's scoffed because it's like impact, but it's because he's in LCS for 8 of those years. Or it's like SOAS, but it's fucking top lane in Europe. Like, you can sort of dick around and come back, and the extra curricular elements don't matter. To be the best and stay in LCK for 10 years, that's no joke. And by the way, that's where, like, even any complaints about nepotism wouldn't fly, Monty. If Faker had actually become legit shit, they would have found a way to move him out of the team, I'm telling you guys. He would have been made an ambassador, or he'd have become the coach or something. They wouldn't have just kept him here forever. So it's not like he was just propped up. Like, he had to also reinvent his game a bunch of times.
Or they would have just let him go to China. They wouldn't have made
him
the offer.
Maybe they've got the money, sure.
Yeah, I mean, they just wouldn't have made the offer. And I think too, going back to the moment that Faker appeared on the scene, I think what was so remarkable about him was that this was obviously ICAST Faker's debut game, where he played in Italy in the mid lane, and he was playing up against, CJ Blaze at the time, which was one of the top teams in the LCK. And we didn't really know what to expect from Faker because he was considered like this solo queue god, but we had no idea how good he would be at the professional level, especially in team games. It can be difficult to translate positive solo queue experience into professional play and professional teamwork. And right off the bat, there was that famous game where he played the Nidalee into Ambition's Kha'Zix. Yes, Kha'Zix versus Nidalee was in fact a mid lane matchup in 2013.
Kha'Zix was a banger champion. If people don't know, mid lane was really strong. Yeah,
yeah. Alex Hitch, very famous for playing that one. So what was amazing was that he solo killed Ambition, who was considered one of the best mid laners in the world at that time. And then he roamed bottom and killed Captain Jack and Lustboy on a turret dive with his bot lane, snowballed the game, and ended up winning. And there are very few times, I think, in the history of esports where a hyped up player comes in and then just instantly delivers an insane performance in their very first game of competition. I don't know what if you can think of any, but like Faker's career just began with this astounding thunderclap, and it proceeded throughout that entire season. I mean, there were games where when he was playing MVP Blue, for instance, which contained like Acorn and Heart and Deft. These were all players that would become very famous. Easy Hoon as well. He forced us, you were allowed to surrender, and he forced a surrender at 20 minutes by playing Deathfire Grasp LeBlanc and just one-shotting everybody on the map, getting a massive gold lead, and then deleting people. So it was really quite shocking to see just how good this guy was right from the get-go. He still needed to work on his teamwork to a certain degree, and the team was all very young around him as well. And so they didn't win the spring split, but they did win their first title in summer, which is when the famous Faker versus Ryu, Zed versus Zed outplay occurred. And then from there, it was just basically, a series of titles. They went and won Worlds, came back, and then immediately had the undefeated winter split in 2013, 2014, where they went through the entire tournament and the bracket without losing a single game. So it is, I don't know if you know any instances, Thorin, of players who were kind of just superstars right from their first game.
Like, the problem is this. What makes Faker unique is that he was not only himself individually extremely good. Like, I'll give you a piece of trivia people won't remember. That year was the first year they ever did an all-star tournament that was voted for by the fans. And when they did the fan voting, even though Ambition got voted the mid laner, there was a very real discussion at the time of should it be Faker, even though it's his rookie split. Like, that was like a real discussion because, like Monte says, the eye test was crazy. Like that LeBlanc game, when you saw it, you were like, no joke, pause the game. That's the best game of League of Legends ever played, and it's his first fucking split of the game. Like, if you go back and watch that, it still holds up now. Like, it looks insane. The moves he's put, his mechanics were cracked already. So already, right, here's the key thing. In a team game, he individually was, if not the best, almost the best. But then crucially, the fact that they then just won the first year, mate, that's what no one else can compare to. Like, I can tell you in CSGO that, like, Zeus was incredible his first year, but his team wasn't going to win the major, mate. They weren't even in the playoffs of a major. Like, they were in no position where they were going to win. Like, they had a chance, but they didn't. I could say anyone, Flash. It took Flash a couple of years to get to like a final of an OGN or something, like, that's the problem. A lot of people can do it as in like they are a prodigy. They appear in the game. They're super good individually, but the idea that you also like sort of get the team aspect sorted and then have the success as a team, that's almost unthinkable. You can even make it bigger, mate. Even in sports, that almost never happens. Like that, because for example, spoiler, like Tom Brady wasn't some fucking stud quarterback when he won, guys. Like, remember, he wasn't even supposed to be in the fucking team. It was supposed to be Drew Bledsoe. So that doesn't count. Then if you go with like LeBron was mega individually, but he was miles from a championship for years and years. About the closest you could do was maybe like Magic Johnson because he won the first year he came in. But even then, he was playing with the person who not long after went on to have like the most points in NBA history. So he was a somewhat of a like secondary figure. So I don't think there's anyone, mate, because as I say, he's done it in a team game, but he was both the best individually and had the best team. Like that's so crazy. So it's also why, if you now bring it back to today, look, he's not in contention to be the best player now, but the idea he's even still mixing it up with the peers that are. I mean, remember the Chovy's and they are the guys who are the ones in status for that title. I mean, he goes to MSI now where he's going to play against Knight, who's another person who's supposed to be the best. So the idea you're even still in the mix that year later is ridiculous. That's a testament in itself, I think.
Yeah, I also think that Faker did benefit from the fact that it was very early on in the scene and there wasn't, a robust kind of tier 2 at that point in time. The tier 2 at that time in Korea was basically the tier 1 where players would form their own teams or join minor organizations, then play in champions. run by OGN, and then they get knocked out early, and then like the big teams, like T1, KT, CJ, all of these teams would then acquire those players later on down the line. So the farm system was basically the early stages of the tournament. But the thing is, Faker didn't even start on one of these farm teams. He didn't even start on a lower brand. He literally started on T1. T1 scouted him. T1 got him. T1, I assume, molded him to a certain degree, even though he was just an exemplary talent. But I don't think you would be likely to see this anymore. But to your point, Thorin, what's so crazy is that he, it's not like he was competing on a high school team. He went straight from, the equivalent is like, he went straight from practicing his, if he was a basketball player, like going down the street and playing pickup games, into the NBA and then being the best player in the NBA. That is nuts. That is just, it was so difficult for me to process how this could be possible when it was happening, especially somebody who's watched esports for years and years and years. Because like you say, even in 1v1 games, it didn't happen. And 1v1 is the most likely place for it to occur.
Yes.
Because the ladder isn't that different from professional play if you're very good at laddering. Obviously, the mentality of playing a best of 7 in StarCraft is different than just kind of hitting next game and getting a random opponent. You do have to prep more for a specific player's styles and tendencies and everything like that. But to do this in a team game and to do this right out of solo queue with some maybe minimal scrim time, maybe a couple months of scrim time max, and then debut and beat one of the best teams in the world, and then continue to make a run to third place, and then actually winning a title. And it's also the way the title was won. In summer, it was a reverse sweep. He was basically a rookie player, and showing that level of mental fortitude to go down 0-2 in a series, switch their style, and then come back and win the final game in such a dramatic fashion.
Should we do some of the bad now?
Sure.
Because here's the problem. Since T1 lost, like, spoiler, we can't even just leave that there's a sentence. There's been about fucking 10 episodes of the Monty Wolf Show that are just all about when T1 wins and how they might be the greatest team of all time. So already they've lost. That's a big problem already, Monty. But then the other problem I have is this. The way they lost, mate, actually is quite bad for a few individual people, including Faker. Like, I've got to say this, mate. If you actually look, Faker's now had these 4 finals in a row where he's come second, right? And he's part of the reason why. Like, here's the thing. I don't think he's choked them away, but I do think in the finals, he just doesn't have the magic that he will in like a random season game or in an earlier quarter. In the big finals, it's something, he wasn't quite Faker for me in a lot of these finals. You know what I mean? Like, I keep waiting for a game where he's going to pick it up. And it's like, it's just a bit, here's the saddest thing about T1 to me, Monty. They haven't played bad in these finals, but they have sort of just like let the opponent take the final from them, if you know what I mean.
Yep. No, I agree. I think the issue is this, Thorin. They made 5 straight finals in the last 2 years, including all the domestic finals, 2 of the international finals. They have been favorites in 4 out of those 5 finals. In 4 out of those 5 finals, except for the domestic final last year against GenG, which they came in as very big underdogs and did get 3-0. That was the expected result of that final. That happened. They really haven't delivered. And I think what's disappointing, and if you guys want a conversation about this too, it happened on Power Spike between me, Dom, and Degon. What's disappointing is the manner in which they lose. There, as you're pointing out, there isn't an overperformance. And to tie this back into Faker's history and his legacy, he used to be the guy in finals who would pull out new champions. He would create extraordinary plays. Think about his mid-Riven play when he played against KT.
Yeah, season 5 summer.
Yeah.
The one where in the same series he did the Cassiopeia, like looked away from the ult and then like fucking like, it was that whole final was cracked. He was playing against Nagne, for you guys who don't know, and he pulled out this mid-Riven, which is obviously not a champion that we expect to see. And he was playing into Cassiopeia, and he tower dives Nagne and has this insane juke where he dodges the ultimate and then ends up killing him on a tower dive in mid lane in a 1v1. And this, there was at one time a Faker who would
take these risks, who would play unorthodox styles in championship games and pull them off with such skill that it was truly a wonder to behold. And now the Faker we get is, I guess, unfortunately, the one where in game 4 of this series. Now, I want to add some caveats here, because I do think that T1 got really hard outdrafted in this game. It was very, very, very difficult for T1 to play their team composition into GenG's team comp, which we will get to. But at the same time, Faker was mechanically misplaying the Ahri. He was dashing in, using Zonias before he could activate Charm or Everfrost, getting caught out. Part of that was Peanut being very, I mean, good is a difficult word to use for Maokai Ultimate, but choosing the right time to use the Maokai Ultimate to kind of stuff T1's engage. But as for Faker, it was underwhelming performance. And we really haven't seen the spectacular Faker, and we saw spectacular Faker a lot during the regular season.
Oh,
like,
we did for sure. Like if someone only watched this final, you're going to think that this is like the narrative that like Faker isn't a character. In the split, he was doing very well. I agree.
Oh, yeah. It was great. This was probably Faker's best split,
for
no
sure.
joke.
For like 7 years or something, mate.
7 years.
Pretty good amount, yes.
I mean, he really did hit a new level, so I don't want to take that away from the narrative. I think Faker really played well, but in this final, he didn't carry as hard as he could have or would have in the past. And I think we've seen this too in the MSI finals last year. He was probably, especially in the 5th game of that series, he was pretty bad. In the World's playoff run, his rise in the semifinals was great. He was probably the best player on his team in the semifinals, but he didn't really show up for those finals either. And I don't think it's a nerves issue, but I just don't see like the same commitment to making the big plays and kind of unveiling something new. And in fact, as Dom and I discussed, it really feels as though T1 in the last couple of years, when push comes to shove, they are really unwilling to activate their star players or put them on playmaking champions. Like, we can talk about like the Jin Yumi fiasco, which was just terrible from them, that happened last year in the finals. And then we can also talk about how in game number 4, they just horribly mess up their draft. They save a top lane counter pick for Zeus, and then they basically pick a full peel composition into a GenG team comp with Tristana, Jinx, Lulu, Maokai, and Cassante that wants to fight front to back. So they have no threat on the backline carries of GenG. Like, you are never going to kill the Tristana and the Jinx. And Tristana and Jinx can both build Kraken Slayer and then just focus down the Scion at the front line. And like, how are you supposed to kill one of these carries? If you go in as Lee Sin or Ahri, you are going to get Maokai ulted. You're going to get Maokai W'd. You're going to get knocked back by Tristana. There's wild growth and polymorph for Lulu. They have so many ways to keep you. Even if you find the best angle ever, they have point and click abilities that just ruin your ability to engage. So, like, the Scion definitely wasn't it in the top lane there. And picking, what's frustrating is you have Keria, who's a player that is the MVP of the league. Now, why is he the MVP of the league? Because he was playing all of these dominant bot lane champions. He reinvented the support meta around the world with the AD carries, but he could also play the enchanters. He could also play engage. And when push comes to shove, you're putting him on Braum in a do or die game. Like, that's the best thing that you guys can do in this series. It beggars belief in a way. And I feel like when it's match point and T1 needs to win a game, they just go so conservative for whatever reason. And they don't really have the killer mentality that you need in order to face tough opponents in these finals.
Which, by the way, not only with past T1s do I think is that the opposite of what it would be, but actually historically, the dominant champions in history do the exact opposite of what you're talking about, Monte. Like, if people don't know, I always used to think in CSGO, the most genius thing Astralis used to do was their rep was that they were the best team just in traditional standard Counter-Strike, Monte, like do proper tactics, read the game correctly, do the correct like handshake at the right time. But what actually made them super dangerous and win loads of championships was when they had you in the position where it's like a fifth round. So in this scenario, it's like late in a game and it's so tense and everyone's afraid to make a mistake. That's when they would do something mega ballsy, Monte, because what they knew was this logic, right? Which is like everyone's going to be uncomfortable. It's the end of the game. Everyone knows it's like all the stakes are high. So actually, since I know my opponent will also be somewhat tentative to do something, actually any sort of surprise play I make or aggressive move almost becomes amplified in its effect because he doesn't want to do that. He wants to just play safe and sort of just, let's both have a good game and see who wins. So T1, I agree. If you just look at all these finals, it's like I say, that's why I phrased it like that. It's not like they've played bad and they didn't deserve to win any of the finals, but they just sort of like, what they sort of do, Monty, is they just allow the opponent, like, look, if you can like really go to another level, then I'll tip my hat and you win. And it's like, that's bullshit. You don't play like that. You play like a war. You play to win and lose. Because a couple of other angles I have, like one, the way they drafted in this series suggests I think T1 agree with me on this, which is, mate, if Zeus is the best top laner in the world, could be true. It's every day except every fucking final, mate. I'm sick of that narrative. Like, homie, you've never fucking been the best top laner in any final ever. What's this guy doing? Like, I'm so bored of seeing him turn up to finals. And remember, I'll just put this in context. He ain't playing Smeb and the shot. Bro, he's playing against fucking Thorin. He's playing against Kingen. Like, he's playing against Bin, who at the time in that tournament was shit before that final. In fact, they booted him out of the team after that, if people don't know. Like, these are ones where not only if you're the best do you win, but like, you're supposed to be the big favourite here. Like, the joke is the other team should have to be questioning, how do we deal with Zeus? Like, he's got a fucking monster the game. They don't have to now. Like, he takes care of himself. And then I'll just throw this out there. Even though I don't think like Gumushi's terrible or whatever, I've always thought he was a bit overrated. Mate, the guy who just mad outperformed you is a rookie, bro. He's a fucking rookie. Gumayushi made that Pace guy look like he's fucking ruler for reals. Like, what are you doing? So those two, like, look, in general, it was a bad performance overall from T1. They didn't hit peak form, but like, that Zeus one, mate, that is going to haunt him because if you're a T1 player now, if you reach a final, this guy has to have a big turnaround final at some point because quite frankly, he's the choker in my opinion. The others, I can give him reason. He's the choker in my opinion. Zeus.
I think that Zeus's performance over the playoffs has been rocky as well. Now, part of this was that, at least in the KT series, they were blinding him Gnar versus every game, which put him into some bad matchups versus Jax. And Keen is obviously, like, he's the best Jax in the LCK right now. So there's a lot of questions about why you would do that. So they switched it up and started to prioritize his picks during the previous GenG series, which was successful. But they didn't prioritize the Jace in this series. Like, Jace was picked in the first game, but then more or less went by the wayside. And they also, it feels like what happens within T1 is that Zeus, here's what I imagine occurs. Zeus must be saying in some of these finals, no, don't worry about the other top laner. I can handle it. I can handle it. I can handle it. Okay. Because there's no other explanation for giving Bin the Gwen.
Yep.
Not banning the Gragas after Doran fucking had an insane, like, I get that you don't expect Doran to have like a crazy pop-off game on Gragas in game number 1. I get that. That's forgivable. Not banning it in game number 2 when you are on blue side is fucking crazy. Like, I'm sorry, guys. That is crazy. But he said what must have happened is it's like, oh, don't worry about the Gragas. It was a bit of a surprise before. I'll play Kennen this game. It's going to be okay. We'll deal with the Gragas. Now, we can also say, what happened in the World Finals? Why didn't they ban Kingen's Aatrox in Game 5 of that series? So something must be happening where Zeus is like, guys, I got this, I got this, I got this. He don't got this, is what we've understood. And then after Game 2, when GenG's up 2-0, it's like, well, I guess you're just Scion now. You clearly are not having a good series. We need you on some sort of tank. We're going to play a more traditional front-to-back team fighting composition. And it worked. And I think he did have a good Scion game in game number 3. But the problem is that because T1 keeps getting inconsistent performances out of their stars in big matches, which is honestly kind of inconceivable because Zeus was so consistent in this regular season. He was playing all these blind Gnar matchups and he was dumbstering people. He was shitting on them, but he just can't deliver on that in the finals. And I think one of the other issues that I've noticed is that T1 in these playoffs didn't feel like they prepared for their opponents. When they played against KT wasn't showing new things. KT was showing the same things that they had shown during the regular split. Now, KT has a lot of dimensions to them, so it can be difficult to beat. But if you compare the T1 versus KT series to the GenG versus KT series, GenG was extraordinarily well prepared for KT. They beat all of KT's best comps and best champions by being smart and changing their playstyle in their own draft. And then in under 24 hours, GenG turned around and they beat T1 playing very different drafts and playing a top lane Gragas that, you know, we didn't see in the KT series, right? They brought new surprises. I guess we did see it in the fourth game of the KT series, but you know, is like I said, a 24-hour turnaround. You know, they like to play this into Jax. I mean, Gragas is a good matchup into Jax, but these were picks that they debuted on that week, and that maybe T1 wasn't ready for. And T1 didn't bring out any tricks, really. They played a bunch of stuff that they've been used to in the regular season. Like, yes, they have an undefeated up until that point in time Caitlyn Lux bot lane, but the meta's kind of moved away from Caitlyn Lux as teams got better about punishing it and ganking into the bot side on the push-up. And indeed, GenG had a level 1 strategy to blow Caitlyn's flash and catch them out when they were trying to kind of aggressively ward forward so that they could push early. We can argue about, I don't think it was worth it, the trade that GenG made, because they traded 3 flashes for Caitlyn, including both of their bot laners, even though Nautilus had Hex flash. But had Peanut been able to get down there early, maybe it would have mattered. But perhaps they didn't trade it as well as they could. But you could tell, the point is you could tell GenG had a plan. They had a plan for Caitlyn Lux. They certainly had plans for KT. And when you just don't see anything new from T1, I think the reads become very easy. And then combined with that, T1 just seems to play so cowardly in some of these critical games in the draft. And it's not in a way that enables their star players.
Oh, by the way, just as an aside, because I love when people do bad historical fucking takes. Everyone, when I talked about Zeus and how he choked in finals, who was going like, you mean like Khan? Mate, put some fucking respect on Khan's name. You are aware Khan won 6 fucking LCK championships. Like, can everyone just pause for a second and take in what I just said? 6 of them motherfuckers. And by the way, this guy was a very good domestic player. Like, people forget, mate. He was a choker internationally. Yeah. By the way, Zeus is as well. But if Khan was in a world final or an MSI, yeah, he blew those. That guy was a monster domestically. Don't act like everyone's a choker in every game. Fuck that noise. And then secondly, because I always say the problem with the Khan one is, because too many people were like late to the party, they just jumped in at the end of his career like, yeah, it's just a meme who's complete shit. It's like, that was like 4 years ago, that was the narrative. Then on the GenG side, just mad props to loads of people on GenG. Like, if you're Chovy, mate, what did he do wrong? Wasn't this an almost flawless final? Like, just a great performance, wasn't it? Like, remember, this is another guy who was supposed to be a choker. He's now put 2 of them back to back on the fucking board, hasn't he? And this one is with a different set of players. Like, you know what? If he'd have won like he did in summer, but with Ruler, you go, well, you know what? Like, you do have Ruler as well. He might be the best player in the world. Dude, he didn't even have Ruler. Like, the Pace guy's very good, but like, essentially, Chovy won. Unless Pace goes on to be one of the great ADCs of all time, who the fuck did Chovy win with? Pino at the end of his career delights no one, by the way, and Thorin gets memed on every fucking show that everyone does. Everyone just assumes he'll be the weak spot against every great top laner, Keen, fucking Zeus. So, like, mad props to Chovy for just playing a great final, having none of his past problems. Peanut as well. People love to tell me every fucking month, Monty, what Peanut isn't and what he can't do. And it's like, have you got an eye test? Look what he is doing, you morons. He's playing fucking really good jungle in League of Legends. Yes, he doesn't play a certain chat. He doesn't need to. Look at his style. It just works. And also another guy where like, yeah, he can have problems in players, but he's fucking amazing player though. Like look at his floor level. And then I'll just throw this out there. Everyone knows the Pays guy went off. The other person, just he wasn't in the game that needs to be given praise, is fucking Score. He's won 2 championships in a row. By the way, in an era,
3 finals since starting as a coach. He's made all 3 finals since his first split coaching, and he's won 2 in a row now.
And remember, his team isn't the best team. Like we just talked on like 2 episodes ago about how T1's won like 80% of their fucking games over the last 2 years. 90%. And within that time period, Score just rocked up, won a title with Peanut and Chovy, supposed to be chokers, I've been told, and Ruler never won an LCK title. Then he makes a new team with fucking rookie Botland, wins that as well. Like, what a fucking amazing job. And by the way, the two styles those 2 GenG teams have played show this guy's a cracked coach because he tailors the style to the personnel, but then creates a unique style that no one else can replicate. It's actually really impressive. Yeah, so just mad props to all those GenG people. Great performance.
Score, I mean, I'm obviously insanely biased because Score is my favorite player in League of Legends history. But frankly, the story with Score was always like, when is he going to win a domestic title as a player? Because he didn't have the right pieces around him a lot of the time. Finally did it. Is probably the best player in history to never win Worlds. He had an extraordinary career where he role swapped. And he goes to the military, comes back out, turns into a coach, and he has activated this team in crazy good ways.
He obviously just has one of the best minds ever for League at this point. It's just obvious.
I mean, that was what was so amazing about him as a player and made sense for his jungle transition was that his sense of macro is just insane. And so what he's been able to do with this roster, even with, I would say, sometimes a jungler that is prone to mistakes with a rookie player like Pays, who has to integrate this roster. We have seen Pays' development over the course. He started impressive. To be fair to Pays, he was very good right from the start, but he did make a lot of rookie mistakes. But we really didn't see that up, very much in the playoffs, and certainly not in the finals. But I think what's impressive about GenG is their adaptability. You give them enough time, and maybe double elimination is just the perfect format for GenG because they adapt better than other teams. Certainly they were powered up. Obviously they would have been eliminated. Thorin had a pretty poor performance in their first best of 5 against T1. And what they were doing in the first best of 5 was that each team was first picking Jace on blue side. And then we were seeing the blind LeBlanc picks from Chovy. And, that proved problematic because by the end of the series, T1 had really adapted to playing more peel supports, trying to play Thresh, trying to play Tahm Kench, even though Chovy, I think, had individually a very good performance, it was difficult for GenG to play out those compositions. You fast forward to the next week, they're playing against KT. And the prep was very, very clearly there. We don't see the LeBlanc anymore. There's more of a priority on the Ahri picks. Now, Ahri was, banned a lot in the first series by T1 or picked away. But you see that priority come out. But what was so impressive to me, Thorin, is that they started playing the Tahm Kench. So let's take game 2 between GenG and KT. KT wins the first game. Really dominant game from KT. You start thinking, oh shit, GenG might be in trouble. So KT pulls out one of their pick compositions. Again, we've talked about this. BDD's up until this point undefeated TF this year. They play Xayah Rakan, Viego Malphite. What is the key of KT's pick compositions? Every champion has some form of single target CC, which allows them to find you on the map and then chain the CC. It also allows them, if you are slightly out of position in team fights, like we saw in the KT versus T1 series, they will just catch your frontliner and then 100-0 them by chaining the CC. So what does GenG do in this game? Well, they play champions with a lot of escapes. So they play, an Ornn who's very hard to kill, who also has dashes and can use his ult as a counter engage. They play Wukong, who can W away. They play Ahri, who can ult away. And they have an Aphelios, but critically, they pair it with the Tahm Kench. But that's not, that is kind of self-explanatory. But if you actually watch this game and watch how they're playing, GenG knows exactly how KT wants to play. And they don't give them any openings. Delight and Pays are glued together on the map this entire game. So there's never an opening to kill the Aphelios because the Tahm Kench is always, and I mean always, next to the Aphelios. when they are doing objectives. So for example, when they're pushing mid lane, they basically just death ball. They go as 5, push up the mid lane, dragon will spawn, and then they will go back as 5 to do dragon. Now, normally this is suboptimal. If you have like a herald push in mid lane, you want to leave a couple people there, send a couple people back to do dragon. But they know that KT, the way they operate these pick comps, is that the TF will port in, KT will send a couple people down there, they'll instantly get a man advantage on the dragon, and then they'll win that fight and start to turn the game around. So instead, they just very deliberately and very slowly push up. It looks like a solo queue game in a lot of ways. They push up, and then they just collectively as 5 go back over to the dragon. But what this means is that KT never gets the isolations that they want in this composition, because GenG knows what they want to do, and they respect it. GenG respects the fuck out of KT's like pick comp, and so they win this game actually quite easily. Okay, so let's go to the next game. What does KT do? They're like, oh shit, they've downloaded our pick comp. Like they can play this style. It's not just about the champions that they play, it's about the way that they're playing the map and not giving us openings. So then they construct fucking KT Exodia comp from earlier this season. Ezreal, Karma. So they haven't lost with that duo bot lane. Sejuani, Renekton, Talia. You're like, oh my God, like this is the style of composition that T1 banned out to beat them in the second round robin. And that's where KT then went back to the lab and cooked up the pick comps. But you're like, holy shit, like KT got everything. They got everything that they wanted. And yet, GenG is able to put together a very beefy front line against the Ezreal and the Karma and out team fight them by using mid Cassante with some early pressure from Peanuts Elise. And so at this point, you're like, oh my God, like GenG has literally prepared so well that they beat KT's 2 best team comps. And at this point, you're like, this series is over because KT, there is nowhere else to go for KT. Like KT is fucked at this point. And the only thing they could do is maybe, pull out something new in the third game or the fourth game of the series. Didn't happen. Instead, GenG pulls out the top lane Gragas for Thorin, again dominates this game. They try the Twisted Fate this time around, doesn't end up working. And you can really see that GenG's preparation paid off and that they knew exactly their win conditions against some of KT's compositions. And when I saw this, I was like, I don't know if they can prepare well for T1 in 24 hours, but holy shit, that was an impressive preparation. When we get into the finals, it really just doesn't feel like T1 has prepared for GenG at all. You don't see that same reaction. They had a week to prepare for both KT and GenG. And instead, GenG is the team that's, having these amazing performances on the top Gragas. Thorin is popping off on some of these teleport flanks, isolating members of T1. They have, as we discussed earlier, the level 1 plan for the Caitlyn and Lux. Even if it wasn't wholly successful, the prep was still there. And then they lose a game in game number 3 because T1 is playing a traditional front-to-back team fighting composition. So what does GenG do? Instantly turns on a dime. They say, okay, if you want to play Peel and you want to play Sion Tom Kench, first off, we're going to T1 bans the Tom Kench. So they actually don't allow that option for themselves. And then they save their top lane counter pick Sion into double AD carries who could build Kraken Slayer and basically lose the game themselves. Like they themselves have a terrible draft T1, and GenG saying, okay, we will fight you front to back, but we're going to do it with a fucking Maokai because our jungler plays Maokai, which is still one of the best junglers in the game if you can get it through the early game. Like the late game is insane. And we'll play Lulu Jinx, and you have to dive us, or you opt into a front to back team fight. But your problem is that you don't have 2 AD carries to bust the tanks. So it was a really, I think, hard game from T1, but their last team composition really had no identity. Like you can't have Ahri and Lee Sin trying to go into the fight while Sion and Braum are trying to peel for a very low mobility Aphelios. You will just lose. You will just lose, especially against the CC. Like you can't let them have the Lulu. You can't let them have the Maokai in that case. And these are known. Like it's known that Peanut's jungle pool is basically Vi, Sejuani, Maokai, and Wukong. So you know what you're getting. Like it's not a surprise.
Yeah, the key to me is, like you say, it's actually, if anything, if you specifically go from the GenG angle of how they won this LCK split, because they weren't the favourite at any point in time. In fact, there was even a point in time when we were coming to playoffs, Monty, where the angle I was waiting for is, dude, I'm just waiting for KT to beat GenG and make a telecom war final. Like, it looked like it could even have happened. So the key for me is, this is why I also give a lot of the props to Score, is when I watch the LPL matches, I'll just be straight up with you. I just think it's individual performance decides those games. You have so many big name players. If a superstar player pops off, he wins the game. So sometimes in the LPL, you can look at it and go, whatever, we both drafted okay, and you just won. I agree. If you actually look, GenG's like evolution over the split, and especially at the end, how they essentially downloaded the opponent and countered them is so impressive. Because think about this, guys. The two teams that were the hardest for GenG, the whole split, were KT Rolster because of this style of play, and then they just never were going to beat T1. Those are the two teams that were supposed to be like, right, we can't beat them. And instead, what you found is, after having a whole split, they got handled KT. That one was sorted. Then they came to T1 and they got to play them and got rocked in that first BO1, like the BO5 rather. They got easily handled in that upper bracket final. But when they came back in the final, the difference is T1 did think it was just business as usual. Run it back. If anything, let's play safe with our picks with a better team. But yeah, GenG actually each time came with a game plan. Like the coaching staff just killed it this split, mate. What a great job. And obviously, the players look very coachable.
Yeah, and it's not like Chovy was, you know, a known Tristana player. He had played one other game of Tristana this spring, but it was the perfect pick in that scenario. And even though they fell behind early, yes, the jungle mid 2v2 with Ahri and Lee Sin is very strong. Yes, they had some nice plays onto mid lane to kill Chovy, but it doesn't matter when you don't have late game threat onto Tristana and Jinx, and they can just basically optimally fight every single team fight, and free auto. So I mean, I think GenG really deserved this title. They absolutely played better in the later stages of the playoffs. Yeah, I mean, I think they had a bad read the first time they played against T1, and T1 justifiably won that series, but it didn't feel like T1 took KT seriously. Like, again, we have the questions. Why did T1 pick KT? That was stupid. Okay, like I know that they lost to Hanwha, but like Hanwha looked way worse, just way worse.
That was an overreaction from the D+ series, wasn't it? Come on, it had to be. Had to be.
Yeah, and I mean, KT did look bad against D+, but like KT over the end of this split was much more threatening as a team. And you know, you come into you know, the finals, and it just looks like they have not prepared for GenG at all. They make scared picks. You know, for all of the praise that Faker was getting, kind of roaming the map, Chovy comprehensively outroamed him this series. Chovy, this is what, to your point earlier, Thorin, about Chovy being a choker or Chovy only side laning. Like, Chovy was everywhere in these last two series. He was dumpstering the entire map. He was playing really, really, really fucking well. And yeah, Paze's score lines look good, but Paze was fed a lot of these kills. And I'm not saying Paze played badly. Paze played well, but just objectively, Chovy and Doran and Delight and Peanut Paze was probably the worst player on this team in the last two best of fives. He played great, but he was probably the worst player on this team. But you know what he did? He did his fucking job. He received the kills. He put out the damage. He carried some of these games, but a lot of the hard work was being done by Doran, Peanut, and Delight really stepping up in the last two best of fives. Delight was amazing. I mean, Delight was so good, guys. I was very, very impressed by him. The creativity of some of his playmaking. Like, think about the moment in the KT series where Delight was playing Tom Kench in game number 2. And basically, you can see how smart this team is in terms of planning and traps, because there's a moment when Lehens is standing on a ward in the mid lane and they're trying to catch him out, but they're far away and they don't want him to just jump over the wall. So what they do is that Delight pretends to sweep a ward. So he turns on his lens, walks up to the ward, which disables the vision, auto attacks it once so that Lehens thinks that he's just sitting there going to keep on clearing the ward. Then he uses Abyssal Dive to dive on the other side of the wall, which still knocks up Lehens. Chovy's on the other side, charms him, and they 100-0 him. That is a fucking baller play that happened. And this is the level that GenG was playing on. They were thinking ahead. They were setting vision traps. They were coordinating to create these incredibly creative pincer attacks on the enemy. And yeah, really just on a next level.
By the way, I'll throw in there as well. Based on things I've heard in the past, particularly from LS, the other reason why that type of play is very impressive, Monty, is historically Chovy famously is supposed to be quite a quiet player. That he's the sort of guy who expects you to know what to do to play with him. So I don't imagine that's like Chovy making that call, Monty. That's like I imagine Delight just found the pick and was basically like, come on in now, and they just coordinated the play. It was a fucking sick alley-oop, though. I agree. It was pretty good.
Yeah,
that was almost T1-esque.
Yeah, it was almost T1-esque. You know, in the end, it felt like GenG was better at creating picks with the Lissandra and the Ari and better at doing the side lanes. And I think the mystery, too, that we're just left with when it comes to T1 is, you know, where was the Elise in game 4 of this series? Like, Elise was banned in a lot of these games, but there was an opportunity here to do what T1 does, play a bully lane in the 4th game of the series, you know, try and get those roams, try and dive bot with the Elise, do what you have been best at for the entirety of this split. And instead they give it up. You know, they were forced to ban the Gragas for the 3rd game of this series, but the whole power of T1 is that maybe you have a flex Gragas. You know, the first time T1 was on the red side was the 4th game of this series. They didn't ban the Gragas. Where's the Gragas here? Why don't you flex the Gragas pick? That way you have a stronger draft position going into R5. You know, I just don't get it. I just don't get the game plan, and it felt very disrespectful the way they played against KT with almost no prep and like should have lost that series if we're being honest.
Oh, they should.
And then they come into these finals, and it feels like again they just, when you start to fluster them, they basically just turtle up inside of their shell and they play the most passive style imaginable. And I wish this is the only time we had seen this, but we've seen it other times. Now it's a pattern now. And you can't be a team that makes 5 consecutive finals with this roster. They've made all the finals, but lose 4 of them and be a favorite in 4 of them and win one of the 4 you're a favorite. That's just unacceptable. Like their 20% finals win rate for a team that is, we know can be extraordinarily strong is pathetic.
I mean, the point is, what makes it ridiculous is, with the exception of RNG, who in theory, like, that was the weird online one from China, if people remember, every other opponent is people they've already beaten, Monty. They've already beaten, like, the fucking GenG team in the regular season and in the upper bracket final. They'd already beaten DRX. DRX was fucking nobody when they went to Worlds. Like, by the way, I saw that little segment you had on that. Like, that is so egregious that they gave fucking, like, Zeka Player of the Year in LCK. Not least because Link the name of the award, you fucking cunts. LCK Player of the Year. He was the world's Player of the Year. Fucking LCK. I saw him in LCK. He wasn't even top 3. That's no. I won't get into a whole thing, but that just triggered the fuck out of me.
It honestly felt like that was given to Zeka because he didn't win finals MVP, because unfortunately what happens right within Worlds is you don't have a Worlds MVP, you just have a Worlds final MVP.
Yes.
And Kingen did deserve the Worlds final MVP.
Oh, for sure.
Zeka was the one who
he was the real MVP of the run, of course,
of the entire tournament.
Yes.
So it just felt like, oh shit, like this guy deserves some acknowledgement, so we have to give it to him here.
It's basically, people don't know. It's like in the NFL, I notice what they do is, because they nearly always give the MVP to the quarterback, if you really did have like the craziest running back or wide receiver, you just get like offensive player of the year. You know, they almost invented that for that purpose, you know.
Dude, the fact that not this past season, but the season before, Cooper Kupp didn't win MVP, it's like, it's all, you know, what I hate about the NFL is like, I get, guys, that the quarterback has such an outside, like the quarterback performance has such an outsized, effect on team performance that it is very difficult to give MVP to a non-quarterback player. But it basically just proved in the current NFL era that it was going to be impossible for a non-quarterback because you couldn't have the season that Cooper Kupp had as a wide receiver, which was record breaking And if he's not going to get it, then no one's ever like what
exactly.
You just have to imagine like what the fuck is the performance that somebody's going to have in order to get an MVP from a non-quarterback position, which is depressing. I don't like that personally. I think Cooper Kupp should have won, but whatever.
Should we shift regions, Monty?
Sure.
I've got one thing I'm going to address, but what's hilarious is I'm going to blue ball all these fucking moron Twitch chat people who hope this is live stream fails and they're going to get like a rant or something. I'm not going to do it, Monty, because basically what happened is, you know, in the modern day, Monty, what happens is when pro players try to shit talk you, they forget to put the shit talk in now, Monty. They just say stuff like, fuck you. And I'm not joking, Monty. The whole crowd acts like it's a 1980s Def Jam at the Apollo and they're losing their mind. Here's my joke. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to address the specific drama because it doesn't even warrant it. No one said anything worth talking about. But I'm going to tell you this that you personally will appreciate. Because when you realize what I'm about to explain, the joke is on this entire generation, Monty. Here's the joke. Do you remember we all love how funny that famous battle rap parody is? Super Hot Fire, the one where the guy does the whole, you know, I'm not a rapper, and then everyone's like, oh my god, right? But everyone's forgotten the premise of the video. The gag is that they're showing what rap battles are like. Because if you don't know, back in the day, before there were big like sporting type events, rap battles were taking place in parks like that. Well, famously, the problem with a rap battle is the crowd can ruin it. Like if the crowd, like in that premise, is all on the other guy's side. If you remember the joke, everyone forgets that video, dude. The joke began that his opponent begins like a real rap battle, doesn't he? Like, well, you do this, and no one's giving him any reaction, even though he's got like real rap battle bars. But then when it goes to Super Hot Fire, I don't know if people don't get this. The joke is he's a shit rapper. He's not good. Like, he actually isn't a rapper. He doesn't say any bars. But because the crowd's biased, they all just go like, oh my God, this is the great. Oh, he won. Like, here's the joke in the modern day on this generation. You guys don't even know that's a comedy video. You actually think he just had bars and he won the battle. That's the joke. I've never had to address the whole situation I'm talking about, but I've just fucking bodied your generation. That's worthy of like, that's get actually bodied. Because mate, that's the sad thing. In the modern day, they wouldn't get the gag. They would be like, surely he did win. He's more popular. It's like that's what's crazy to me about the Zoomer generation, mate. It's one thing if you don't like the other person, but like your guy just wins by default. What's the point? Because like I say, that isn't even shit talk, bro. Do you think Conor McGregor would really have made all that money if he was just like, fuck my opponent? Like, no one's buying the pay-per-view for that. You gotta have something witty, maybe refer to something about the person. Like, if you don't know, as an aside, separate to the situation, I gave everyone a lesson in banter. I'll give you an example. This wasn't the main guy who did it, Monty, but because he's just does nothing else right now in League of Legends, good old Selfmade jumped into the fray, right? You should, Monty, if you want to just have a little chuckle, go check out how I handled him. It was easy, mate. I even like brought him in, baited him in, and then just fucking casted him out completely. If people don't know, I did a whole thing where when he was like, you should maybe do pizza reviews, I was like, oh, sure. Which ones are you delivering now? And here's what's hilarious. Are you ready for another example of how this generation doesn't get banter? He goes, it's from a place called Midlife Crisis. Bro, in the joke, you just accepted my premise that you deliver pizzas. I mean, like at this point, guys, not only does the other guy not have to have any bars, he can actually just bend over and let me with a samurai sword chop his head off. And you go, he won. You see that head roll on the floor? He wins the battle. Like, if you know what? If you guys think they win, have it. Go fuck yourself. All of you can shove it up your ass. Get hold of the pizzas. I don't care.
I also just love the fact that like mid-tier or washed esports pros call you irrelevant.
It's hilarious, isn't it? At all.
You're doing actually millions of podcast downloads. It's
wild, isn't
it? It's just so funny because like their premise is, well, because I don't watch your content, nobody must watch your content. It's like, self-made motherfucker, nobody's watching anything you're doing right now. Like, who is actually irrelevant?
So yeah, there's another thing. I've got two angles for you there. One goes like this. Can we stop this thing where anyone who ever played pro is like a god and me and Monty can never be more than a peon? Like, you are aware, essentially in this analogy, Selfmade's a guy who played for like the Minnesota Vikings in 1978 and had like 2 good seasons, and I'm John Madden. Like, I'm the legend in this scenario, motherfucker. Like, let's not even debate that. And then the other thing on the other side would be like, when they do the trash talk as well, it's like, what's the angle here? Because you know when they do that angle, Monty, where they go, you're irrelevant. Here's the problem, and this is why I know that peons out there, you're the ones telling on yourselves, because you think relevance is based on likes. No, that's not the metric they use on Twitter. Let's just go by raw engagement. That's the title on Twitter. Well, spoiler, Monte already knows this. Motherfucker, I have months where I can do like Selfmade's whole year in a month on Twitter. That's the numbers I can do. I don't even flex them, boys. I can do like 20 million engagements a month on Twitter. Are you aware, right, that my job isn't Twitter? Twitter's like, I always say, like, my notepad, I'm just scribbling on and chucking it in the waste paper basket. Like, so that whole thing's just hilarious to me. I thought I'd just make it a dog on this generation, because I just don't, at this point, mate, it's like what they don't get is this. No, I'm weird. I'm a bit of a relic in this sense. I'll still do banter. Other people are just not going to bother anymore, Monty. In the modern day, it'll just be the J Cluckies that are like ratio, and then you'll get ratioed and just go around, close Twitter down. See ya. There's no banter to have anymore. Like the other person has to engage in the banter for it to be funny, doesn't he? Like, at least in that sense, even though he fucked it up, at least Selfmade tried to play the game. He just got bodied, didn't he? And by the way, he always does this thing, Monty, that you can tell he's a really young guy who's still immature and insecure about himself. And here's how you know. Because he always tries to make fun of me for that famous clip I did in like 2016 or whatever, 2015, when Scream rejoined Titan in CSGO. I did a whole video where I do this thing about like, he move, he headshot, pop up. I did this whole, it's hilarious, mate. But here's what Selfmade doesn't get, Monty. He thinks, cause that's like silly, that I should be like ashamed of that. So he always references it. It's like, mate, that is straight fire. There's a reason you're referencing that clip in 2023. I made it in 2015 when you were like fucking 8 or something, mate. You're still doing your paper round. Like, that's a fucking, first of all, I don't get insecure about doing a comedy skit, mate. I'm just fucking entertainer. I can actually live with it. What's that? That's some shit. If you think I'm scared of that, like, you must go to the disco, mate, and just stand in the corner going like, oh, bloody hell, is she looking at me? Like, just get over it. You go and talk to him, you know. Like, what are you getting insecure about that? As if you're ever going to roast me. What next? Oh, you fucking burned Shaq as well, you loser. Like, how are we going to invert the fucking hierarchy?
Oh, you were just on nationwide American TV. Meanwhile, I just looked up Selfmade's stream, by the way. I just looked up, he's streamed 46 times in the last 90 days to an average of 387 viewers. And
that's a shame.
People are calling you irrelevant, Thorin. He's not on a pro team.
Exactly.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Anyway, thing is, so I will say, to be fair though, Selfmade, you'll never be irrelevant, because Irrelevant's actually a top professional who plays in the LEC. Oh, you do this all day, mate. Let's keep going. Whatever. It's all good.
Oh man. Yeah, got replaced by a guy who can't even speak English too. So we got two guys who can't speak English. Turns out.
Should we do LCS then? The obvious other reason to pivot to?
Sure.
Mate. Did I set this up or did I set this up? Because sadly, I was wrong that I at least gave FlyQuest the credit they'd beat Golden Guardians. But I was right inadvertently. What a dog shit final. Like, what's the point? Like, this just sucks. Like, bro, the real problem with this is we can't even get to the fact. Like, we have to focus on FlyQuest first, because, like, even if they'd lost in the finals, Monty, that still sort of would be okay, because you get the MSI spot. It's your first split. You can even use the angle of, like, we never sorted out the wins from earlier angle. There's a whole bunch of angles you could have gone with. The problem is finishing third into this Golden Guardian. Like, I'm sorry, this split was a failure if you FlyQuest. If you look at the expectations, who you had, how it started, this is just a failure of a split. It's just very sad ending. It's so underwhelming.
Yeah. I think that it's certainly fair to say that FlyQuest was disrupted by the fact that they wanted to have Isla playing as support. His visa took forever, so by the time he got there, it was very difficult to develop him. Also, Isla just played really fucking badly. He had some
very bad games, of course, yes.
Really badly. So perhaps, they were holding out for him, and then he wasn't the support that they wanted, so obviously, the very last weekend, they put Winsome in a tough position, who probably hadn't been scrimming with the main roster. He comes in and at least goes 5 games with the Golden Guardians, but that is clearly a huge rough point for FlyQuest. But also at the same time, M&S came in halfway through the split, and I'm not going to pretend M&S is some sort of world beater. He had his own fair share of int games, and I don't think performed particularly well in the finals. But at the same time, C9 was still able to overcome that. And you would expect a coach like Song, who is literally the reigning world champion coach, to be able to fix some of these issues within this roster. Like, isn't that what Song does? Right? Yeah. He was able to cobble together strategies to win the world championship with an insane underdog team. And yes, the meta was very good for DRX, but you can't pull that off without some good coaching. Like, that's impossible. So I think he deserves a lot of credit for that, but you would expect him to be able to do more, because I think the problem with FlyQuest is that they never really figured out how to play together. Like, how do you go through this entire split not knowing how to play together? And it's just the way that they lost too. It really wasn't even on Winsome. Like, I don't think Winsome he was okay, but Spica obviously had a very bad series.
Yep,
Vikla struggled a lot of the time. They weren't playing around Prince particularly well. And it feels like FlyQuest just doesn't know their win conditions. And even the execution, it's like the ideas are just done so badly. So just to talk about kind of the disappointment, particularly in the last two games, they were dominating. You love to see like the Lucian Nami duo from FlyQuest doing well. I was like, oh, they got this in the bag, 3-1 FlyQuest, like, let's go. Then you see them come in and they just like, there's no communication going on in this team. Vikla's playing Silas. He steals Malphite ultimate. He tries to ult a Xayah that has Xayah ult up. It's like, don't do that. Use it for peel. Like, the way that this should be played is that if you know that Xayah ult is up, don't try and ult the Xayah. Wait till they engage and then counter engage with a Malphite ult onto Silas to protect Prince.
Don't you find that so weird, Monty, that sometimes in League they miss, like if people don't know, I'm going to use a reference that you'll have to know another game, but like the entire meta in Overwatch League at one point in time was based around when the fucking GenG, the ninja champion, did the Dragon Blade ultimate. Like, that literally was what the whole fight was about. You had to wait out the timing of it, right? I agree with you, Monty. When you have like obvious ones like that, it's amazing when people don't make that. Like that should be the mantra in the back of your brain the whole time you're playing that sequence. Like, wait for the Xayah ult, wait for that, it should be doing that the whole time. That's essentially the trigger that you're going to go on.
Or wait for the Malphite to ult you and for them to all in and then counter ult the Malphite. Like, I just, but it's even worse than that, Thorin. So Vikla goes in, then Impact, Cassante ults River, Elise, into his own team, clusters them, and then they get Malphite Rakan ulted. So they get Malphite ulted, knocked up by Rakan, then Rakan ulted, and they just cluster up and get womboed into oblivion, and the game just ends at 31 minutes because they all die and there's a wave in mid lane. Like, I mean, count the reasons why this was bad. Like, they were able to end at 31 minutes, so the wave states were obviously very good for Golden Guardians just to be able to, shove the dagger up mid lane. But also, like, why were they team fighting in this way when they knew their win conditions and had a massive lead? It was cocky. It was terrible. But it's like, come on, man. Malphite is one of those binary champions in all of League of Legends. You cannot lose like this. That's illegal.
Dude, I always think when they have a scenario like that, where, as you say, it's not like there's a massive amount of nuance. He either hits what he's going to hit or just do nothing. I always think of that old DDK line he used to say in CSGO, because I always thought what a great way to frame it as a colour commentator. He would always say there are moments in the game where you have to pause and ask yourself, like, essentially, what is like the best thing that I could do for my opponent right now? So essentially, if you were playing against a Malphite, exactly, you've just done it. That's his dream, is for you to let him do that.
It was actually the Malphite Rakan dream play.
It's like a wet dream play, isn't it?
And I was just like, I can't believe that this happened. I cannot believe it. Yeah. There's just so much threat too, because if the Xayah gets a couple feathers down, then you could actually just root a bunch of people too. Doesn't matter if you caught River out because he's fucking Elise in a team fight. Like, the best thing that could happen is you take River into the center of that just as a distraction, right? And then you get to the final game of this series, and they play in a way that is very reminiscent of T1 with Elise, as in they want to do an early level 3 dive. And what I loved about this, I was very excited because it was a set play, right? And it's not only a set play with Elise where you force the vertical jungling early, but they have the Scion in the top lane, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like, they're actually combining two separate set plays right now, which is like, we're going to accelerate, we're going to do a dive or get some camps with Scion in the jungle early and then TP back into the top lane to catch the wave, right? To catch the wave that crashes into the turret. So it's not going to be, Sion's not going to be too far behind. And we're combining this with a really fast turret dive in the bot lane. But then they apparently just don't know how to execute this, because Prince and Winsome fuck up the wave. They're not zoning Stixay and Huhi off the wave. So the wave gets pruned like really early on. They don't have enough minions to push it in. They fuck up the timing so that when Spica's level 3, they can't immediately dive. Like the wave should be under the turret at that time so you can affect the dive. They have to wait for the next wave. What does this allow River to do? Well, now River has time to get cross map, to get under the turret. Golden Guardians has more time to discuss what they're going to do. They TP a Lysandra into that bot lane, and they're able to stop the dive. Meanwhile, because it goes so fucking badly, Licorice gets a massive lead in the top side by pushing the wave into the turret and denying some CS. And the whole point of this play is you want to accelerate your bot lane because you know that Licorice is going to get some advantage on the Fiora. So the idea here is, okay, we don't care about the Fiora. The Fiora can get maybe a little bit strong because we are going to dominate the bot side, start to stack Drakes, and force the Fiora to fight against us in a 5v5 for like soul point or soul, like 22 minutes into the game. Okay. So the concept is good, but the execution is so bad that it made my soul scream. I was watching this and I was like, Jesus Christ. Like, I love this idea, but it looked like they hadn't practiced. They fucked it up. They gave up first blood to the bot. So they basically just gave them themselves disadvantages in both side lanes. And it was just extraordinary. And on top of that, like Spica then screws up his flash. He should have either not flashed or waited to see if he could get to the wall. Flashes before he gets to the wall, has nothing to repel to. It was just a complete train wreck. And yeah, Golden Guardians played the counter well, but it's not super hard to do that. You know what they're going to do. You have to hit the timing if you're FlyQuest. The timing is everything, and they missed the timing. I mean, what a way to lose.
Oh no, it was just depressing all the way through. Like the problem with that one is, on the one hand, yeah, congrats to Golden Guardians, you overperformed, but you shouldn't even have been in a position to do that. Like FlyQuest, their own fate was in their hand, Monty. They're the ones who threw it away. Were you going to blame?
They had game 4 in the bag. They had a really good plan for game 5, and they themselves screwed up the execution both times, which is why I don't think it's necessarily that fair to be critical of Song, because you can see that he was putting them in winning positions. And it was the players who were fucking it up. But I mean, you could also say the lack of coordination between the players is a huge issue. And the support issue was a huge issue. But, Spica didn't have a great last couple of games either. I think he had a couple strong games, but he didn't have the last couple of games weren't that good. And absolutely, you should be beating a team like Golden Guardians. And I think people will get mad because we're not giving Golden Guardians props. So here are the props. Golden Guardians has massively overperformed on average based on their spend within the LCS. They have been a well GM team across 2 GMs now. So, Danon and now Inero. They've been very savvy about scouting talent for the most part. Yeah, they had some off splits, but they also built the championship core of 100 Thieves. This roster made a finals now. River and Gory were really excellent additions to this roster.
Also, they didn't just outplace FlyQuest, guys. Like, remember, Evil Geniuses, everyone thought that lineup should be mustered on paper. CLG was pretty good during the split. At one point, TSM was even on a run. Like, Golden Guardians was the team, if you rewind, were one of the teams that was supposed to be the fraud in that pack of teams, Monty. Remember when there was all those teams at like 3 to 6? Everyone was like, well, of course, Golden Guardians fall out. They made the finals. Mad props. The problem is, here's why we can't give them infinite props, Monty, because the next tournament they're going to play, they are going to get their fucking body slapped. They're going to MSI, boys. If you thought it was bad, like, I was trying to prepare myself for how underwhelming FlyQuest was going to be at MSI, Monty. You can't send Licorice and fucking Huhi to go and play against JDG and T1. Like, you can't do it, guys. They're going to get murked. It's going to be so bad.
Yeah. I mean, especially because I will say about Golden Guardians, they were able to overcome Licorice being like legitimately horrible for most of the season and put together a playoff team. That was impressive. Like, we never had, like, Stixay was overperforming to a level we haven't seen in many years. Gory and River were very good.
They were just good players. Fair play to them.
Yeah, very good. So it was really just the insane, like, 10-ton weight of licorice that was holding them down, and he stepped it up in playoffs to his credit. And so like this is the team that we could have seen if licorice was now licorice didn't have a great final.
That's why I always think, like, when people always spin that narrative where they're like, well, you said this guy was shit, and look, what did he do? Well, the answer here is just not shit his pants. He didn't carry the game. He just normally goes down there, squats, pulls down his trousers, fucking squeezes out a Cleveland steamer, and then they have to come in and clean it all up. In this scenario, he didn't like clean up himself. He just didn't do the shit. So like, yeah, look, in a way, props, but you all make it sound like he 1v9'd the game. And it's like, because people were doing that angle with all the players here, Monty, like, oh, Licorice sticks in who he abandoned by their former team. Like, stop. Which former team would you send these players back to? Who would you trade out of Cloud9? Right, so you guys are taking out Fudge and putting Licorice back in at you. Of course you're fucking not. No, even Cloud9 would never make that deal.
Fudge was the best player in the final.
Same one for Sticks here. Oh, you're going on any of those teams. He used to be on FlyQuest. Would you take him over Prince? Would you fuck? He used to be on CLG. I think even that's debatable. I'd probably still take Luca. The guys, it is cool when people do turnarounds to their career or having this scenario, one last Cinderella run. That is cool. But don't pretend like they actually was secretly cracked the whole time and we just like built a narrative for 4 years that they were washed. Like these guys have fallen off year on year. Yeah, they used to be in the top. It's why, actually, I agree with you. If anything, their success spins back into the GM angle, which is like how shrewdly GM this team was. You actually did pick people who sort of had one last run in them, or and the right team could maybe be better than we thought. Like, fair play. If I saw this roster on paper, like I thought like people like River were good, but I could never. There's no world I ever would have had him in a final. That's outrageous.
Yeah, they massively overperformed, and I think that the reason why, if you're wondering, people are so down on Golden Guardians after overperforming is because, as I said on Power Spike, this is the ceiling of this team. It's not going to get better than this. There isn't hope that with this roster, like people delivered massive overperformances this split, and they were also better than the sum of their parts. But where do they go from here? And it is disappointing because at least with FlyQuest, for all of their flaws, you can theorize that if their teamwork came together, they could be a lot better. Like they could crush LCS.
Yes.
Like you see the individual player strength. And not to say that River and Gory aren't individually good players, but we're not expecting like Stixay and Huhi and Licorice to maintain those highs. And maybe even Gory and River to maintain those highs. And if you just think about what happens when they play some of the other teams that we're watching within the LCK and LPL playoffs and LEC, it's like, I'm thrilled that there is a strong mid-jungle synergy between Gory and River. But what does that look like versus Owner and Faker?
Oh, they got no edge, but even worse, their bot lane and top lanes get their head smashed in every game. So yeah, as you said, they have no win condition basically, unfortunately, guys.
Like unfortunately, with FlyQuest, here's things we know about FlyQuest. Vikla hasn't had a good split, okay? But we've also seen him be arguably a top 3 mid laner in LCK.
Oh.
We've seen that when he was on KT last year. Prince was arguably the best AD carry in LCK last year. So we've seen that he can hold his own. These players individually can hold their own. We've seen impact at many, 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 many international events where he has performed well. We've seen Spica be the only good player at TSM at an international event. So when we look at the peaks of all these players and we've seen them in these international, we haven't seen Vikla and Prince, but we've seen them at high level domestic competition. Yes. We know that they are good. And so there's a lot more hope around FlyQuest because they definitely haven't hit their ceiling. But when we send even a peak Golden Guardians, they are going to get destroyed. And that feels bad. And maybe FlyQuest would have gotten destroyed as well, but there at least was the possibility that they wouldn't get destroyed.
Yes. And also, I'll throw in there as well, at least FlyQuest, with the amount of time they have left, I could have seen a world where they went and they got the initial scrims in and they sort of figured their shit out in the group stage, and that could have made them half decent at that point. If Golden Guardians goes, it's going to be the story of a million teams that finished 3rd seed in all the West. It's like, you go, you get the shit kicked out of you in the scrims, people stop even scrimming you, like T1, etc. will stop after the first block when they win 4-1, and one was when they they were trolling with like a first time pick. Then after that, you just scrim all the bad teams. You get like one BO1 win over like PCS or something, but then you're not going to like do anything in the bracket stage. It's over. Like the problem is, like, can anyone conceive of a higher ceiling for Golden Guardians? I can't. Like, I mean, we just talked about now, like essentially they already got over performances from the lesser players in the team. Like this was pretty much best case scenario. And quite frankly, the final was a joke. Just was, you know?
Yeah.
They even
I think
knew. That's one of those finals, bro, where you don't consciously think this, but in the back of your mind, you know it's like, mate, second place is good enough. We're not supposed to win this thing, you know.
I mean, when they threw the first game of the final, despite having such a commanding lead, and they allowed Fudge basically to hard carry Cloud9 back into relevancy, and Fudge was the best player in this final. I think he played really, really well. But, you know, they downloaded Golden Guardians very quickly. And they were, so first off, they were able to come back against early game advantages, Cloud9. And then after they lost the second game of the series, M&S had a pretty poor performance on Akali. They just switch it up, play a very safe mid laner in LeBlanc, and then play for early game, have the Elise, have the Renekton, Lucian, Nami. And then as soon as Golden Guardians doesn't have those early game leads, it just completely falls apart, right? Blabber has a really good game on Poppy in game number 4, and they crush. So, you know, if this version of Cloud9, because remember, we're not really excited about Cloud9. Do you think M&S is going to hold up against fucking like Chovy, Knight, and Faker? This guy is going to get absolutely destroyed.
Dude, let's just do this then. Let's just do this convo.
Look, M&S can end against bad NA mids. And by the way, mid in NA, this split was horrible. Like that.
That's why we need to have this convo. We need an intervention right now for M&S. Here's the intervention, Monty. I can tell already what people are doing is every massive pop-off he has, that just stays permanently in their brain, and they think that's his normal level. So they do, like, for real, the way people talk about M&S, Monty, they think he's like the Faker of fucking NA. Like, he's just some chosen one, prodigy, who now he's entered the server, is going to smurf forever and just dominate completely. It's like, that isn't even who he was this split, like you're saying. Yeah, he had some games which were really big pop-offs. He had, in general, his style's clearly very aggressive, very mechanically based. But bros, like, you've got to look at the downside too. You've got to look at the bad games. You've got to look at what happens sometimes where he looks like he gets a bit caught in draft and wasn't sure if he should have picked that champion. Like, as Monty's saying, there are a lot of flaws. Like, I'll give him the positive, which is because he has a high ceiling style of play, I could see him getting like a BO1 off at MSI. Maybe he can surprise someone, but like put him in series play. Which Asian mid lane has he beaten in his best of 5 series? Go on, propose one for me, because I can't think of a single one. A single one, guys. Like, you guys, even if you want to joke around, like, even like fucking BLG is going to do work, mate. Like, you know what I mean? Like, everyone good's going to get work done. I'm telling you.
Yagao is having a very good playoff run again. You just see that guy just seems to turn up.
Yeah, he knows how to work with his team, mate. He's just a great team mid, you know. So yeah, that's what I mean. There's no edges you're going to get. Like, someone like Yagao in theory is one of the weaker mids, and then he like activates his whole team, like old Niskiff, you know. So like, you shout a lot, and the other mids, by the way, are murderers. It is like Knight, fucking Chovy, the best in the entire world.
And you know, as of this morning, like, I haven't seen the games yet because we started recording this at 8 a.m. And it was a best of 5 between EDG and BLG, but we know that Billy is going to MSI as well now, and Yagao has been popping off. Again, I haven't seen the games yet, so I will be watching those. But it's been a really good playoff run for Billy overall. They made it from, you know, round 2 of the playoffs through 2 single elim matches, and then barely lost to JDG, and then followed up by beating OMG and EDG to make it to the finals. Like, they've had to play what 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They had to actually do almost the entire bracket of LPL playoffs, and they've been consistently winning, barely winning at times, but they pulled it out. So, you know, if we're talking about Cloud9 against, and we know that Caps is going to MSI because G2's already qualified. So if the answer is Vitality is the other team that's going to MSI, I mean, Perkz is probably, in terms of individual ability, the closest player outside of NA from a major region. But you just, with M&S, he has stepped up and filled a void, but you have to consider how fucking weak mid was in LCS this split. Like, Gory was the best mid laner. Like, yeah, it was bad. It was a very, very bad position in LCS.
Yep.
So yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I think NA, everybody was so excited about NA at the start of this split because it looked like there would be a lot of parity, but instead what we saw was actually, I think, pretty significant weaknesses.
You know,
overall.
one thing I will say, though, because we didn't touch that much overall on Cloud9, I would actually say this. I do think this is an appropriate moment where if you're Jack, if I were in, mate, I would already have just been on Twitter and done some sort of like style on all you fuckers tweet. Like, how about my systems now, dickhead? I'd just do something like that, mate. Like, because here's the problem you guys haven't thought about. I looked this up the other day. I've actually got the numbers there. I can run them for you. If you look in the LCS, you can roughly divide the LCS almost into two halves, right? Because it goes like 2013 to 2017 and then 2018 to like this year. So you get like one extra split, Monte. And over that time span, here's how it went. So the first 2013 to 2017, obviously TSM won 6 titles and we're in all the finals. Everyone remembers that. Cloud9 got 2 titles. Not bad, right? You win during that. In the latter period, everyone's going to remember, right? TL dominated, right? They had the 4 titles in a row. Cloud9 in this latter period has won 4 titles. 100 Thieves have won 1, Evil Geniuses won 1, TSM was 1. So when you add it all up, TSM is still in the lead with 7. Cloud9's at 6 and Team Liquid's at 4, guys. So Cloud9 is 1 title from becoming like the winningest org in the LCS history. And that's with, they didn't do it like, remember, when I'd say the TSM ones, that's Bjergsen and Doublelift, or Bjergsen, right? If I do the Team Liquid one, Monty, they're 100% Doublelift. Who the fuck did Cloud9 do it with? Spoiler, I can go back through these years. They did it with High and fucking Balls and all those guys at the beginning. Then they did it with Niski. Then they did it afterwards with fucking Perks. Then they did it with Jensen again. Now they've done it with Eminet. Like, bro, like, it's not it. Haven't you noticed, guys? There's no Michael Jordan there. That's just Jack. Jack is the only factor connecting all that. Essentially, the reason why I think it's so cool is this, because if you ever look in the middle period of Cloud9 when they didn't win Monty, but they always used to be 2nd and 3rd in LCS, what was the number one complaint we all had? I used to have it for Jack, was when's he going to take a chance? He's being too safe. He's sticking with the guys he likes, like Sneaky, or he sticks with, fucking keeps Impact too long, or, he keeps bringing High back a million times. Well, you know what? After that, he started taking a lot of chances, but the key thing I think he's done correctly is the systems angle, is when he takes a chance, but he doesn't quite like the way it worked out. Like, you know what? The Perks angle was all right, but it wasn't what he hoped for. Team didn't come together. It wasn't a team that was going to win Worlds or be the fact. Then he takes a pivot. At one point in time, tried the Diplex guy. Obviously, you had the Jensen angle. Like, the way actually that they've retooled, is there any org better at retooling than Cloud9 the LCS? There isn't. They're just the best guys. Even their bad splits, realistically, they're usually like the 3rd best team. Like, this team has been very well run over the years, mate.
And also, Jack has such a good sense of when to swap players. I mean, famously,
think about the Summit one, by the way.
Benching Jensen, like, that was crazy.
Sure. Dude, even the Summit one, right? He kicked Summit out. Steve Arns hadn't seen enough of Summit. He brought this fucking cocksucker back. Well, who was right on that one, eh? Remember, he was the MVP when he was on Cloud9. Dude, Jack, I tell you what, aside from the one where he brought Jensen back for one last title, he doesn't even have to go back to the same well again. He can actually realize I'm done with these guys, or they don't fit my style of team, and I can just move on from you. It's not like, think about TSM. TSM and all these other orgs are desperately trying to get Doublelift back and Bjergsen back, and they're just trying to recreate the past. Jack actually can reformulate a new squad that can win.
And he creates redundancies as well. So having Diplex, but having M&S on the academy roster. So if he needs to call M&S up, he can. So if there's an unknown factor, and, he also said this on Twitter, but he has been, ever since the beginning of last year with LS, where this is one of LS's priorities, was creating a strong academy team to do internal scrims, which is obviously always a good idea. That's been maintained. And he said that their academy team has had a winning record against most LCS teams, which is not surprising given the quality of LCS, by the way. But it also allowed them probably to practice very effectively heading into the finals, because one of the problems is that you never get good practice in the later stages of a playoff. But if you have an academy team that you can scrim internally with, then it's a huge advantage. I don't know for sure whether they were doing that, but at least it was an option. And yeah, I mean, it also just creates that redundancy so you can swap out players, which is something that Cloud9 has done. And they've really been the only org to do that successfully. This wasn't some fucking like, swap out Alfari move.
No. I mean, dude, even look at this one that they ended up with M&S, right? If you asked me, pause after the offseason and you see that they're not signing Jensen, if you tell me essentially they've decided to save money by not signing Jensen and they're going to go with a complete rookie or a backup rookie, I would tell you, well, then it's very unlikely they're going to win the championship. That's probably a bad move. I can't really say that now. Like, it's not like Jensen was bad, but it just worked. Like, they managed, look, they obviously they had to put up with the Diplex experiment, which didn't work, but they had M&S waiting there, and it certainly looks like they, as you say, they created that intentionally as a redundancy, a contingency plan for if Diplex didn't work. They clearly didn't really think M&S is bad. They just sort of thought maybe we don't want to start with him, or maybe he needs to be bedded in, or whatever. I would imagine he's a bit of a spicy character, if I had to guess, just from the way he plays. So yeah, it worked though. In the end, they were the ones that laughed last, right? I would have assumed they wouldn't win now, mate. And the difference is I would be crowing like, should have kept Jensen. Like when fucking Peter Dunn tried trash talking about not having Jensen and winning that one time. I was primed to do that, but what can I say? Jack just won the split again. Like, apparently he didn't need Jensen. And so that means also, guys, he also saved money and then won a split. Like, well, why am I going to critique him then? He's fucking killing his job, and everyone else, by the way, is selling their team, selling their players, going bankrupt and leaving the fucking LCS. Jack's just saving money and winning the LCS still, getting one title away. And by the way, the reason that was relevant, what I said when I looked at the orgs, it's TSM that's the one ahead of them. So you just have to worry about TSM winning any more championships. Like, essentially, if you give them another 3 or 4 splits, it's just going to be Cloud9 in the league. They're going to have 8 or 9 championships, aren't they? Like, right now, why would you bet against them? They're just the best org.
And for those people who, say that, who are laughing at the systems and saying that, oh yeah, well, LS, it wasn't about winning domestic titles. It was about doing well internationally. Guys, I think LS is very smart. I loved seeing the innovation he brought to the LCS. But do you really in your heart believe that mid Ivern was going to be the way that NA beat GenG? Guys, the region just sucks, okay? There's no hope for international success. The practices environment is trash. It changes good players into being bad because they can't practice properly. The region is very small. There isn't a large enough player base to be competitive to push these players to the limits like you can get in Asia. You can't practice, in Korea and China, those teams all practice against each other. It's a much higher stakes, much more competitive environment, okay? So when you come back at me when I say Cloud9 systems are clearly effective, which they are, guys, because they keep doing this. They keep being creative about their rosters. They keep creating redundancies. They swap out players when it's necessary. They make aggressive roster moves. And while they hold on to the players, like Jack has held on to Blabber because Blabber is the best jungler in North America, and he has been for years at this point in time. He holds on to the core players, but when those players start to get washed, he is the first to recognize it, and he ditches them immediately and replaces them with up-and-coming talent, and he's got a great eye for talent.
Oh, yes.
There isn't a way. LS could be the best coach in history, and he would not make NA win. Song is the current world championship coach. He coaches FlyQuest. FlyQuest couldn't even make MSI, guys. Okay? I don't know what to tell you. NA, you are delusional. You are, the amount of hopium you guys are smoking is insane. NA is not a competitive region. It is not. Okay? It will not be. The player base is dwindling. The audience is dwindling. Let's talk about that. Finals were down 100,000 concurrent viewers. They were down 100,000 concurrent viewers this year. Part of that was because Riot, for whatever reason, had the brilliant idea of putting their finals in the early afternoon of Easter Sunday. Why would you do that? Why would you put it on Easter Sunday in a majority Christian country? There's not even a time crunch. MSI doesn't start till May. You could have done it next week. You could have done it the week after that. We have plenty of time to get the players to London. There was no reason it had to be on Easter Sunday. No reason. So first off, they crushed their own viewership. And second off, obviously, Golden Guardians versus Cloud9 is not
just the marquee doesn't work, does it? Exactly.
Yes. I know.
Yes. And also, no, it's not, it's both that, Monty. Not only is Golden Guardians the name, like it'll take many years before the name changes to sound like a cool org, but even bigger, everyone already on their calendar had like, right, FlyQuest versus Cloud9 the final. So we also had a bigger marquee matchup we didn't get essentially. So it just can't, yeah, everything. Unfortunately, this was like the perfect anti-storm that fucked Riot. So what do you want?
It's just like, you know when Easter is, Riot. And by the way, Thorin, if you had to pick the worst part of America to put a final in on Easter Sunday, you would pick the South, the most Christian part of America.
Of course, yes.
It's just like, I don't get it. I don't get it.
And by the way, I'll throw this out there
next weekend,
because people are going to think that might even be a factor, Monte. Like, obviously, it was taking place in Raleigh, North Carolina, right? So I know already, Monte, people who aren't like big old school esports fans are going to think like, well, that'll be also part of what it was. Like, you know, like that's not a great place. If you don't know, the reason I actually know the opposite of what people think about American esports, that it's actually a very niche thing still in America. In fact, my analogy, you'll see why I'll say in a second, is I think that esports in America is like what WWE is. Because as a young boy, I used to wonder when they would show where the WWE stadium was, Monte, like, where the fuck is that? But I had to learn they do a circuit of places like in the South and in the Midwest, the same places. Well, if people don't know, the people who took that model in esports was MLG. MLG, they were like based in like Columbus in Ohio, and they were always in places like this. Like they would be in like an upstate area, or even if they went to California, guys, they'd be in like a smaller place. They wouldn't be in LA. They'd be in like Anaheim or some shit. Yeah, or some, these sorts of places. So the point is, like, this actually in theory should be where there's not loads of things going on in that week in Raleigh. In theory, if you actually do this right, you should get a massive stadium crowd. It should be crazy.
I casted in 2012. I casted MLG Raleigh.
Oh, but it was banging,
right? Raleigh, and it was banging. Yeah, it was. You know, the events in
they used to get a big turnout for those events.
Raleigh, yeah, huge. And Raleigh's a huge tech hub too. People don't. I mean, Epic Games is in Raleigh, right? And there's a massive. It's called the Research Triangle there. It's actually one of, you know, surprisingly, it has, I think, one of the highest like college degrees per capita of any place in America. It's very well educated. Like, there's a bunch of tech companies there, a bunch of research companies. And you draw from a pretty large population and a young population as well. So, and there's also, you know, not that much that comes to town in Raleigh. So people are pretty excited about going to this stuff. And obviously, Texas has always been huge for esports, partially because it's a huge population, but because there's like a bazillion gamers in Texas. Anyway, yeah, it could have been a much more successful event had it been on a separate weekend. But you look at the viewership numbers, and they were way down for the finals. And they did, by the way, just as an aside, they did 14 million viewed hours on LCS. This includes co-streaming across the split. In 2017, they were doing 28 million viewed hours. So LCS in the last 6 years is basically 50% of what it was.
What was the number for this final for LCS? What was the number roughly?
270,000 concurrents.
Right. Here's also what's mad about that. Do people never notice the numbers they keep showing for like LCK? Dude, more people watch LCK in English than watch like fucking LCS. That's insane. Because I think wasn't like English viewership of LCK like 400K or something at once. It was some pretty good number, right?
I mean, I'm just happy that the fans finally have taste.
Here's the sad thing. In a way, yeah, it's right. But I should actually add the context there. If people don't know, back in the day, it was inconceivable that like the final of LCS would have less viewership than fucking OGN. There was no way that would happen. Not just for time zone, language barrier, the casters aren't in the actual venue casting to the crowd. Like, everything a negative. So, like, yeah, that just shows that on the one hand, it's good news that, like, at least people watch LCK, but it's actually terrible for LCS. Like, you're getting that compared to 400K or something for LCK. What?
I mean, honestly, like, in a way, I'm actually thrilled with these results because it means that people have stopped believing the, you know, Reginald peddled delusion that NA has a chance of winning worlds and are finally having taste and watching the good regions of play and becoming more hardcore and informed fans. You know, for my own personal interests, like, I'm not a big fan of discussing the LCS because it's such garbage. I'd much rather talk about LCK, LPL, and LEC. And so if those are the biggest fan bases now, like, I fucking welcome it. Finally, right?
Oh, man, that was the thing that used to kill me, was this. I know Dom particularly has gotten this the hardest of everyone the last 2 years, probably because people have figured out by now. You're a moron if you tune into LS's stream and think he's going to compliment LCS, you moron. Unless he's friends with the player, you've got no chance, have you? But with Dom, they always bang on him, right, Monte? Because they go, I'm so bored of hearing Dom just hate on NA. It's like, you're so stupid, you're actually attacking the messenger, you cretin. What you're mad about is that LCS sucks so much, your favorite content creator doesn't have good things to say about it. That's the problem LCS has, not Dom. Dom's doing a great job. And I've always said this, but I'll just throw it out there. One, if there was a show out there that complimented everyone LCS, it's called Hotline League, isn't it? Why aren't you all just raving about it and loving that? Like, if I thought everyone was hating on a region unfairly, I just wouldn't watch the content, mate. The point is, part of you really knows we're right about LCS. You just wish, and don't get me wrong, I understand wishing for things that can't be. You just wish it was
LCS
differently.
was good.
Yeah, you just wish it was good. We all do, by the way. The real joke is this.
Who doesn't want
I
LCS
meme
to
on
be good?
LCS being bad, but I wish it was good. I wish it was awesome. Like, I've always thought if they did LCS right, it would have been like what on paper it is, but it isn't really. It would be the region where, because of the money, you'd still have like someone like a Korean player get a couple of extra years off in his career, or you'd have the guy who would be the 5th best mid laner in Europe go to NA and be an MVP candidate. And it's like, it would have a lower expectation, but like, you could have lesser players, but a high level of play still. You can still have a great style. The real problem the LCS has is it's still like, it's a much of nothing, isn't it, Monty? Like, you look like the biggest killer for me really is that like angle. I know Dom nailed this earlier. I've said it on past episode, but when he said it, I realized, shit, he's not only right, he's always been right. It's when he pointed out that actually it's stupid to even draft to punish your opponents. Nobody punishes anything in NA.
Yep.
You just draft what works for you and then just play like it was a fucking ARAM or something. You just play and just go, fuck it. So even if your champion pick, like, here's the real joke. I'll tell you what. I'll tell you the player who should definitely go to NA in their career. It is Adam from BDS. Mate, they will not only give him those Dariuses and Olafs all game, he will shit on the league. Like, he'll be the MVP of the league if he goes out. Because like, no one would know how to play it and no one would draft against him. So
I mean,
he would just get it every game, wouldn't
Summit, right? That's
Sort
what
of was,
basically
yeah.
happened with Summit.
Sort of, yeah.
And to go back to the viewership, guys, I mean, in summer 2020, remember, this was like the height of all the pandemic lockdowns. Summer 2020 had almost 34 million viewed hours. We're down to 14. They lost 20 million viewed hours.
That's
and by
wild.
the way, viewed hours are the most important metric.
Yep.
And all esports saw a massive spike in 2020 because everybody was just sitting at home and this was free entertainment.
Yep.
When a lot of people lost their jobs and there was nothing else to do. But you really, I mean, we know that the 2020 production, I mean, the LCS, people watched it because it was there, not because the show was good. The show was horrible that year. Remember the Alienware dome? Like, the production was terrible. It was really like an uncompelling product. But that was the time in which you really had to hook people. They missed the time. That time you have to maximize. You have to make hay while the sun is shining. That was the time that they needed to be their most compelling to retain all of the eyeballs that they were getting. They completely failed to do that. And even though I think this year has been a massive improvement for the LCS as an entertainment product, it hasn't shown the same numbers, you know? And that's a problem. They're down 5 million viewed hours from summer 2022. They're down 3 million from spring of last year. We expect it to be bigger, but they can't stop causing problems for themselves. The Easter Sunday thing definitely cut into their viewership. There's not even a question that was the case, right? And they're down 100,000 peak viewers on compared to last split finals. You know, it's unfortunate that the Golden Guardians made it, because as good as an underdog run can be, it does kill viewership every single time, guys. Every single time. I mean, you look at the last CS major. You know, you don't want unknown teams in the finals. That's actually super bad for viewership. So there were outside factors that Riot couldn't control, but just the general trend. I thought that it would pick up in playoffs just because the regular season games were about as viewed as spring of last year. So it didn't seem like the day change or the time change had really affected things. But in playoffs, like, we just didn't see the same peaks. So the viewing hours went down. And remember that LCS is a league that lost State Farm as a sponsor, that lost Bud Light as a sponsor, that lost FTX as a sponsor. Now, FTX clearly was for different reasons, but we can only assume that State Farm and Bud Light didn't want to re-up because the sponsorship was not performing well. That's what we have to assume. So yeah, I mean, what do you say? Like, how do you sell this? how do you package this and sell this to future sponsors? And it's a critical time too, because the teams need this money. The teams are also losing sponsors. So what you're going to see is, it's not surprising that TSM is trying to cut costs. All the teams are going to try and cut costs, guys, because the viewership is flattening. And until Riot can turn this around, or Riot is offering these teams a bigger revenue share from the skins and microtransactions that the LCS sells, it's going to be depressing. You know, a lot of these teams are going to fold. A lot of them are going to consolidate. You're going to see teams like NRG come in. And as I said last week, I think NRG is a better team for the LCS than CLG was, because Andy Miller cares way more than fucking Madison Square Garden did.
Yep.
And what Andy Miller did, he talked about this. He said MSG is now a major shareholder in NRG. So what this should make you ask, guys, is, did NRG actually pay anything for the LCS slot? Or
it almost looks like they just get to run the slot for MSG, essentially.
Or did they just give up a large percentage of the company of NRG to Madison Square Garden for in exchange for the LCS slot? Maybe there was some amount of money that changed hands, but it seems like for the most part, Madison Square Garden was happy just to take equity in NRG, and that's it. So now we're getting to the point where LCS slots are being potentially given for very little or no money, actual cash, and we're seeing consolidation. What that is it's basically like a merger of those two organizations. So, you know, that is a troubling sign if LCS slots are now not even being sold. They are being acquired through equity swaps. That's not great for the region, you have to say. And that's on top of the fact that FlyQuest didn't even announce the purchase price of the team, probably because it paled in comparison to what Rogue and Misfits were sold for in LEC. So,
by the way, did you already on your other shows meme on the TSM GM? Did you do it already?
Yeah. No.
Let's do it now then, because this is mental.
Knock yourself out. I saved the TSM flame for this show, man.
If people don't know, on Reddit, on actually the TSM subreddit, Team Solo Mid, a guy whose alias is Sui Generis, who is the GM of TSM. Basically, if people will remember, the rumor that Travis reported was that TSM was going to offer their players the minimum salary, which is, I believe, $75,000. Isn't that the number, Monty? It's roughly the number, right?
Yeah.
So the premise goes that they were going to offer them this because obviously cynically they're downsizing. So the GM came out, and people will already know that he previously claimed that it was incorrect or whatever. So everyone was obviously memeing like, well, yeah, it's incorrect because he means, you know, they pay $76,000. That was like the original joke everyone made. But then this GM guy tried to come and clean it up on the TSM sub, and he said, correct. Can't share specifics, but can say it was nowhere near minimum LCS salary, comma, add another zero. Now, here's what's mental about that, guys. If you add a zero to the minimum salary, it becomes $750,000 a year, which would be a very high salary in the LCS. And so obviously there is no universe where TSM is giving their players $750,000. Otherwise, there would be no cost-saving exercise. So essentially, as far as I can tell, Monty, the general manager of TSM thinks that when you take a $99 product and add $1 and it becomes 3 digits instead of 2, that you've added a zero or you've moved the decimal point, right? Essentially, the TSM GM doesn't even understand, not even arithmetic, what numbers are or what the decimal point is. Because as I just said, I can do a comedy skit for you. Here it goes, right? TSM GM comes into a restaurant. He goes, oh, the bills come. Lovely. Oh, $99. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll definitely be giving you a tip. Add a zero. And then the waitress goes, oh my God, that's so generous. $990. That's so, I've never had a tip. And he goes, whoa, sorry, whoa. Can I have that back? Sorry, I meant $100. So you gave a $1, you fucking idiot. But you think you added a zero. The only joke is this. The only person I can tell who has added a zero is the TSM organization at the general manager position. Obviously, there you go. I can do this all day long. That just comes easy off the top. Isn't that mental though, dude? Like, There've been a lot of fuck-ups in history among top execs from TSM Monte and Reddit, but why does it keep going? Why is they just exposing they don't even know how numbers work? Like, what is this?
Because the thing is that TSM fans, I guess, are just so bought in that they will believe literally anything that somebody with a TSM tag in front of their name says, no matter how ridiculous it is, no matter how wrong it is, no matter how unethical it is. Because these tactics have worked for years. How does it keep working, man? How the fuck does it keep working?
Obviously, the other angle of a joke would be like this. The problem was, Monte, one of the last GM figures they had was doing a bit too good a number, running the numbers and embezzling. So it's like, you know, that premise in the movie The Prestige, Monte, where the way one of the main characters was able to pull off his trick was he had blind, deaf and dumb, men moving the equipment. It's like, that's what they did for the GM position. They were like, right, we have to hire someone who doesn't even know what numbers are. That's the only way he won't rip us off. What is this? What is this? And I've never heard of this guy. Also, I will say as well, only you'll appreciate this, Monte. If you're going to be an absolute fucking idiot about the basics of your job, don't call your alias sui generis. If people don't know, that means of your own genius, essentially, in Latin or something.
Of your own class. Yeah. So
no, but I mean, it's outrageous if you're just a moron, though, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's a Latin phrase where generous is the same noun that genus comes from. So genus of the, genus species. So it's referring to a class, and then sui comes from it's a reflexive version of I am. So it
basically means a class of your own sort of.
Yes. Yeah. So it's basically a class of its own third person.
Obviously, in his case, it was a remedial class. You know, he was staying back after school to run the fucking numbers and going, miss, did I added you zero? She goes, well, that's not really how it works there, Billy. But you know what? I have a fucking cooking score already. I've got to get on myself. Give me a break. But anyways, and can you send in the other student, Sam Bankman-Fried? Yeah, you can come in now. What school is where they get this talent from in TSM? I also just love the idea, by the way, that after everything that happened, as you said, not only was it a fan, but it was just the most the people that wrecked TSM was a stupid TSM fan who was objectively bad at the game. Stupid ass Peter Zhang, who, by the way, Team Liquid fired in 2015, guys, ages ago, but you kept him around, some moron guy, and then leader. That was who took TSM down. It's so lackluster, guys. This really is some fucking Death Star shit. I mean, it went down an exhaust pipe and blew the whole Death Star up. What?
What's amazing, Thorin, is only we work in an industry so stupid that these people couldn't accelerate the demise faster. We knew what was going on the whole fucking time, and the quality of these people. But I mean, the fact that they managed to keep it running.
Oh, it is. Yeah, extraordinary. I would have thought this would have gone bust 7 years ago. Yeah, I know what you mean. By the way, I've also just accepted now, Monte, that they're never going to give us the W for the Holy War. Essentially, TSM lies in ashes around us. The corpses and shades of their former employees walk through the realms, almost interacting with us, but not quite. I thought I heard a sound there. I thought, was that Lena? Oh, no, never mind. She's gone now. You walk out. After all, literally, just Reginald just dead on the ground, just rotting. And then we just stood there over the top, and everyone's you didn't win, though. How much more could I win? What they have to just say that we won at this point.
Reginald isn't dead. He's been permanently crippled for life, and he's just sitting there in his wheelchair whispering, but guys, I still have the money. And you're like, great, what else you got there, buddy? Congrats. That's too good. It's just amazing it took so long to happen. It really is amazing they kept up the charade for such an insanely long period of time. Well,
by the way, I will say, if you want to talk about the ultimate win, though, we actually haven't had the ultimate win, Monte. If they really do, for real, ever sell TSM as an LCS team or leave LCS, the episode we do of Some of the Insight, which will have outlasted TSM in the LCS, we instantly win any wars. Remember what I just said, guys? They were in the first 10 finals in a row. The idea we could outlast TSM in LCS, that's going to be the greatest W of all time. So in a fucked up way, even though I don't actually wish it on the LCS, I almost wish they will sell for that reason alone. That would have been inconceivable, wouldn't it? Because spoiler, that blacklist against doing interviews, that's going to have aged badly when you're not in the LCS anymore, Also, if you're Travis, what was it worth it? You gave it all up for nothing. They left in the end, you idiot. It's all for naught. It's all for naught. And here's the other thing I'll never get for you people like Travis is, dude, you still get all the flame. All the fans still hate on you. Like, even the TSM fans hate on you. Like, it's not like you even successfully sort of seduced them. You just sort of get flamed by all angles. People go like, yeah, you're a fucking idiot, Travis. That's like your fans. Then the TSM goes, he is sort of an idiot, but he's not as biased as Monte and Thorin. And then our fans just go, you sell out bitch, you fucking moron. It's like, when does he, he's not getting any W's here. Fucking, this is mad.
But he still is reporting on all the roster, the slot moves that are happening, and desperately play. I mean, I just don't even understand the concept. I said this last week, but the fact that people think that CLG was still old CLG is weird, crazy to me. To me, CLG was just a zombie that had been taken over. It was a corpse that had been taken over by MSG and was just kind of slowly shambling along. And even though I do like the management, by the way, this is not a reflection on the management of the team. Like, I think Greg Kim did a very good job, but there's only so much you can do when your owner just doesn't care.
By the way, though, I have to say,
doesn't care. Like,
people didn't make this meme, but there was that meme where there was a guy in finance, Monte, that really did have the like resume where he did go for real from like some like tech company that went bust to like FTX to like he did them all. He did all the one. Essentially, Greg Kim, you're on one of those, mate.
It was Theranos as well.
There you go. Yes, it's all the call ones. Yes.
Yeah, it was.
So the modern one of that is you, Greg Kim. You went for the evil geniuses with all that shit. You're like, right, I've explicated myself from that. Let's see. Oh, that's just dumb shit as well. Like, mate, that. TSM's all that's left for you now, mate. Score on over there. Score on over there. I mean, I can trust that you know what like actual zeros and digits are. So I'll give you the job already. Sight unseen, I'll give you it.
Also to put a cap on the LCS viewership point, I did pull up the LCK spring numbers. So in comparison, by the way, guys, and yes, there was a lot more airtime. So there's probably double the airtime because remember they played like 5 days a week. It's 2 best of 3s a day. So there's a lot more, a lot more games, a lot more time that they spend actually broadcasting. But even so, the hours watched of LCK Spring 2023 were 69 million. Nice. But that's 69 million. So 70 million compared to 14 million, meaning that LCS had 20% of the viewership of LCK across all languages. And the peak viewers compared to 271,000 in LCK for the finals were 1.463 million. So almost 1.5 million peak concurrent viewers. The scale of
people don't know, by the way, that would be
massive.
Like almost the best viewership ever for like a CSGO major. That number you just gave there, by the way.
Yeah,
that's a lot of people watching live. That's a lot.
There's a huge amount of interest in, because we've had 3 finals in a row between T1 and GenG. It's a known matchup. People want to see Faker versus Chovy. Clearly, It's extremely hyped. But even the World Championship last year was the biggest World Championship by viewership. So it's not even that it's not that we see that League of Legends is doing badly. English is the second biggest language that is watched on LCK, and then it's followed by Vietnamese and then French. So, 2 of the top 4 streams are Western audiences, guys. So it's absolutely enormous, the viewership that this league has, and it continues to do very well, in spite of the fact that it is on at a garbage time for North America. Granted, LCK does have a lot of European and Australian and New Zealand fans because it's actually in pretty good time zones for those regions, but it's absolute shit for North America. The real question is, why aren't they monetizing the English language broadcast? Why don't they have sponsors that would appeal to the Western
dude?
Market?
When I saw those numbers, like I said, where it was like 400k people watching like the fucking final or whatever, like how is that? Here's the obvious question. We'll tie it back into actually the jokes I made at the beginning of that Orcs episode 2 episodes ago, Monte. Back in the day, it used to be one of the most prestigious jobs to do that gig because it was considered the best non-Western region and people wanted to watch it. It was the best League of Legends in the world. Nowadays, people will have seen LCK has to some degree gone the way of LPL, where it's like people who aren't like the top caster in the world, or they just want to live in the country, or they have some extra reason to like the region. That should be one of the best paid gigs in all of League of Legends. Like that should essentially be the number 1 gig, is to be either play-by-play or color main person for LCK. The numbers justify it. Like these people should be getting big salaries.
I mean, to be fair, I was being paid better than the LCS casters back in the day because Riot was not paying them very much money.
Sure.
And I was much better at negotiating, right? So, but you know, that's not true anymore because they just Riot is a monopoly, so they just cap all the casters' wages. So they can just do whatever they want now. There is no negotiating. You just have to take whatever they give you and say, please, sir, can I have another? I mean, they don't even pay casters more for international events at this point in time.
Yep.
Basically, like what Riot tells casters these days is like, do you want to do worlds? You're taking the same day rate that you get for your domestic league, but also you're gonna have to fly somewhere for a month and like live there. And you know, sucks to be you. Basically, you can't negotiate with us. It's over.
No, I mean, as you say, that you literally can't negotiate because if they say no, you just don't work the event. You sit at home like, well, I get nothing, and I didn't get the career opportunity. Brilliant. So you're actually incentivized to just essentially bow to them at every turn. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of the casters are too big of cowards to actually just stand together and say, well, if you don't negotiate, none of us are going to do it. That's the play, but they won't do it because they're little cowards. So unlucky. Glad it's not my problem anymore. Got to say that.
Anything else?
I mean, we could talk about LPL a little bit. Obviously, we're probably going to save the majority of that conversation for next week because, again, this aired at a time where I couldn't actually watch the Billy versus EDG.
We'll go deep on the next one. It's all good.
Yeah, we'll go deep on the next one. Maybe we'll try and get an LPL guest over on the show in order to make that happen. We've already seen this matchup clearly from Billy and JDG, where JDG squeaked it out. Just very briefly, I mean, we talked about this on Power Spike with Dom. So if you want a deeper LPL conversation, I would head on over to that show. But Bin has been performing extremely well on this team. Yagao obviously is having a hot streak through the playoffs. Elk is also doing super well. JDG, they are a team that if they get those early advantages, and they often can because their individual player strength is so high that it becomes very, very difficult to beat them. It can be over super fast in a game, and this team is very dangerous. Clearly, I think the front runner to win this split, particularly because Night Ruler, Missing are all doing amazing right now, and Kanavi, who is shaky for a lot of the regular season, has been turning in more consistently good performances, and 369 has probably been the most consistent top laner in the LPL this split. Been doing really well over there. So exciting times for JDG now that we know that both them and Billy are going. I am sad about EDG, but at the end of the day, EDG overperformed. Fofo is a pretty big downgrade over Scout compared to last year. And as good as Leave has been, he got caught out a lot in the playoffs and played more like a rookie. You compare that to Pays, like both Pays and Leave were very, very strong for rookie players, but Pays held up in high pressure situations. And also the way his team played made it easier for Pays, whereas Leave did get caught out quite a few times over the course of these playoffs and didn't necessarily look like, I mean, especially in the games against JDG, they punished his positioning quite severely. And they were really just individually outclassed against JDG. And you could see that the mid lane is, I think, a particular weakness for them. So the problem with LPL is that so many of it's so hard to get a read on the regular seasons because a lot of the teams take it more casually. You only get the single round robin. So a premier matchup could happen in the first or second week of play, and then you just don't see it for 7 weeks. So you don't really have a good way to measure strength against each other. And also teams ramp up very, very hard for the playoffs and start to perform a lot better. And so as good as EDG is, like, as fun, they have very strong macro fundamentals, but when it comes to really star-studded rosters turning it on for the playoffs, there was always going to be that question for them. And I think they overperformed, but ultimately it's probably a good thing they're not going to MSI.
The sad thing for me is that the whole time I thought this was impossible. There were so many teams with the big name players and all the talent, and the parity looked so good once you got past those top teams. I was waiting for the greatest double elim portion of LPL ever. And if people don't know, BLG and OMG just blue balls me forever because I wanted to see, what happens when Jingdong plays Weibo with the Shy? What happens when Top get to play with, again, now like you've swapped teams and then you play in the matchups. What happens when fucking LNG, when can Scout and Mount and fucking Tarzan hold up. I never got to see them all. I just get to see JDG play Billy and EDG. That's it. That's it. I never got anything else. So luckily, I think JDG is going to win. They're going to go to MSI. It's all good. It's all fine. But I did get a bit blue balls. Like some of the problem is the teams that made it. It's like, look, OMG is a fun team to watch, but that's an example of where I hate underdogs winning games because I know they're not going to win the LPL. So it's like the problem is the people you're beating, there's an outside chance they could have, you know.
Yeah, I think OMG really did perform well, though. Especially the growth over the season was really. I mean, they're just a fun team to watch.
Yeah.
It would have been kind of hilarious to see them at MSI just because their style is so interesting, and it would have created some absolutely zany games. But I do think Billy and JDG, given the playoff performances, are the right teams to go. And I'm particularly happy that no matter what happens to JDG, they've already qualified for MSI because I need to see the ruler versus FaZe matchup. Like I gotta see JDG versus GenG. Like that.
Also,
that matchup is
Monte,
so
good news. Do you know how many years I've been waiting for Knight and fucking Chovy to just play a best of 5? People might know that stat where like Faker and Rookie were never meeting. The same shit's been happening these last few years. Well, the good news is because they're both at MSI and there's that double elim format, there's a really good chance we're going to get it now. There's a really good chance.
I mean, we can still get blue ball, but it's a lower chance that it could happen.
I just can't believe how many years I've waited on it. Well. And here's the thing, they're going to all these worlds as well, by the way. They were just always on the other side of the bracket. Like, it's a fucking nightmare, mate. So finally, I'm going to get to see it at last.
And by the way, I mean, we've been hyping up MSI for the entire year ever since they released the format because the format is really authentically very good. It's not just like good by league standards. It's just good. It's just good by objective esports standards. And now we have the teams that we can talk about, guys, because we know 7 of the teams that are going for the major regions, but screw NA. We don't care about them. However, think about this. Think about the fact that we now get to watch JDG, T1, GenG, Billy, and G2 all go against each other. And in a double elimination bracket. And we are very likely to see a lot of best of 5 matchups between all of these different teams. And teams are really going to have to adapt their strategies in order to win because these teams all have very different identities. Yes. So, yeah, I think it's super exciting. I think it's super, super exciting.
And Golden Guardians, of course. Put them in the mix.
I mean, I do like stomps. I'm not going to be unthrilled by what Knight and 369 do to Gory and Licorice. I mean, I will be entertained. I'll tell you that. I will be entertained.
Indeed. Do you do viewer questions?
Yeah, let's take a quick break, guys, and then we'll go ahead and do some viewer questions.
Right, we're going to do some viewer questions now. If people don't know, after checking out ye old freeze pipe at thefreezepipe.com with code LFN for 10% off, the next best way you can support us and you actually get a direct benefit from it is to get a Discord subscription, basically. Go to the Last Free Nation Discord and we just get a good cut, basically. And if you do a subscription, you will then be eligible to ask questions in this viewer questions segment. Remember, we say viewer in the colloquial sense, it's not literally the Twitch chat viewers. Although you're certainly free to just scream into the void in Twitch chat. You're muted still, by the way, Monty.
Sorry about that. Had to get back over. Yep, good. Let's get into questions. Do you think a good solution for the MVP award would be to split it into 2 different awards with one for the best player split and one for the most valuable player to their team? No, you just agree on which one you're voting on. That's the problem, is that people use different criteria for the MVP voting, right? So if you actually just told everybody what the criteria would be, you would no longer have this problem.
My problem is just this, is in theory, they've sort of already done that with All Pro. Like in theory, All Pro should just be who's the best in that position. The problem is even that gets blurred. And also, I just have a problem with like the classic one with Season 7 Summer where they gave Jensen the first All Pro, but then Bjergsen MVP of the league. It's like, I just wonder what your criteria is at that point in time, you know?
It's also like the cultural criterias across regions. So for example, in Korea, because they're a more collectivistic culture, they prize team play, which means that oftentimes the best team is just going to have the majority of players on the all-pro roster because they say this team plays the best as a unit together, won the most games, ergo they are the best players because teamwork is the most important criteria that they're voting on. When we know that like, I would say that premise is ridiculous. And how could we have all 5 T1 players as all pro? But Korean culture says that's what makes a player valuable. So here we are. Meanwhile, in China, for example, you have Scout getting MVP on LNG, which I think was very well deserved, but they were able to pick a stellar player off of a good but not best team within the region, which makes a lot of sense, right? So it really is very difficult because even comparing region to region depends on the culture and the expectations of the voters that are going in, so it's certainly weird. It's certainly weird, and it is a big problem. So you should I think the real solution is listen to us. We have the correct opinions. Our opinions are facts. Can you explain the irony of tipping culture in America when one can get better, faster service elsewhere without paying a dime extra? Okay.
Here's the joke. We can actually contrast this in a very unique way, Monty, which is if people don't know, I didn't know this myself when I went there. Korea has an incredible customer service culture, but it's all culturally coded, as in, this is the part that's going to shock you. In Korea, you actually shouldn't, as etiquette, tip people. They actually sometimes get very uncomfortable. Like, I've done this a million times. You've seen it, Monty. Like, if I try to give the old woman who runs the Korean barbecue, like, extra, dude, most of the times they're quite uncomfortable. They try to make you take the money back, and they almost see it as like, I know it sounds weird, as like an insult in a way, sort of like, but if I did a great job, isn't that a reward in itself, sort of their mentality? And so in Korea, what's incredible is because they have like all these young people, this like food culture and like going to cafes, it's the opposite. You pay nothing extra, but they all compete like motherfuckers trying to be the best at their job as a waiter, barman, cook or whatever. So what's weird is I know it doesn't have to be about the economic component, because when I was as someone who's from Europe, when I heard that thing in America, that not only like should you tip, but if you don't, they might not make a living wage. I remember just going like, mate, you can talk a lot about political systems, but that's like some sort of fucking sign of a failed system. Like, I can do my best job, but not have enough to live on. So what would your take on this? Because I wonder, with your background in Korea, you must have an interesting take, right?
Okay, so I have worked tip jobs. I've bartended, I've waited tables. That was part of the way that I paid for myself both during and after college. And so I have very strong opinions in favor of tipping, but I agree with you, Thorin, that it is fundamentally a broken system. But at the same time, refusing to tip it's just punishing people unnecessarily.
Oh, it is, for sure, yeah.
I mean, it's really like when I say this as somebody who has done this, it is truly a dick move, guys. And you can be mad about the system, but by not tipping, you are actually just fucking individual people, and that's not cool. Now, I will say, at the base level of service, so the premise here, I think, is kind of flawed, because when you say one can get better, faster service elsewhere without paying a dime extra, to Thorin's point, on average in Korea, I think that is somewhat true, right? Where the average quality of service in America is not necessarily... First off, I do think that American service is generally better than European service.
It is for sure. Easily, mate.
People can get mad surly at you. And I find European service pretty annoying as an American. So I will say that at the lower end in Korea, the service is as good, if not better, as the lower end of American service. If you go to an average restaurant. So here's my argument. There are bartenders and there are servers at fine dining and like high-end cocktail bars that make 6 figures off of tips in America. And what you have to remember is that these people are fucking professionals. And so my argument would be, at the very high end of service in America, the service is unrivaled in the world, because these people are... because the tips are so big on these very high-priced meals and they are making very good money, their knowledge of wines, their attention to detail, they will wait hand and foot on you because they know that there is a huge reward coming at the end. And especially for cocktail bartenders, at some of the best bars in the world, if you go there, these people are the cocktail equivalent of Michelin star chefs that are literally interacting with you, that have vast knowledge. They are inventing these cocktails. They have vast knowledge of you know, the spirits that they are serving you. They can tailor drinks, make recommendations. They are providing a valuable service to you that you just they deserve to be compensated for their expertise and their knowledge. So this is an argument that I see, but truly, if you enter the world of like fine dining and high end cocktails, these people are extraordinary and they absolutely deserve the money that they make. And they will make your experience very, 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 very good.
One problem I have with this whole topic, Monty, is if you notice, it so clearly tends to center around dining experiences. You're either in a bar or you're at a restaurant. This is the main area people are concerned about the tip. And the big problem I have goes like this, Monty. Too many people conflate the experience with the actual job of the waiter. As you're saying, like, if the waiter at the end of the day brought the food, wasn't rude, like kept communication up, brought you what you asked for, if the chef fucks up and that food's bad, you still tip the waiter because he has to live. Like, the waiter didn't do the mistake. I feel like too many people in the modern day, Monty, make the whole experience one. And what they do is this: if the food's awesome, you give a tip. But the waiter didn't make the food. And if the food's bad, you go, fuck this place. And it's like, but the waiter did his job. Like, this is why essentially the problem with it is you haven't, in that scenario, incentivized correctly. Like, the customer doesn't know what he's doing in this scenario, you know.
Right. And also, especially if you're at good restaurants, oftentimes the head chef will be one of the owners of the restaurant.
Makes
right.
sense.
Like,
Yeah,
so,
of course.
you know, if you oftentimes the chefs are also themselves at least partial owners in the establishment. So the way you punish the chef is just like by not going back to that restaurant. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And the chefs, I mean, there's a whole, obviously there's a whole problem with the way, I mean, if you look at, there's been a lot of stories about Noma, the very famous, you know, often rated best restaurant in the world in Copenhagen in Denmark, and the fact that they are basically shutting down the restaurant because of the economics of even running high-end restaurants. They take a bunch of unpaid interns basically, and that's, I mean, the restaurant basically runs on unpaid interns, which is outrageous because once you have Noma on your resume, then you go and get paid other places.
Right.
But the whole economics of very high-end dining are also just fucked for the chefs, and these chefs work insanely long hours, like, you know, 15-hour days, 7 days a week, and get paid shit, even at the best restaurants in the world. So the whole thing is broken. Like, don't get me wrong, like the chefs also deserve to get paid more money than they do.
Oh, for sure.
But at the end of the day, like, I disagree with the premise that you don't get better service. And even at, I mean, anybody who knows at lower end bars, like, I've lived in Europe, guys, I've lived in Asia. I will tell you that I love tipping in America because if I tip well, even at a dive bar, and by well, I mean maybe a couple bucks extra, do you know what happens? I get free shit. You know, the value exchange feels like, I hate paying extra to tip for my drinks at a bar. But the thing is, I get free drinks when I tip well. I get better service. If I'm standing at the bar and the bartender knows I'm tipping well, I will get bumped to the front of the line.
Yeah, of
I
course.
fucking love tipping.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, by the way,
love tipping.
I would also say as well, this is why if you are a European who's been trained into the world of like tippings for marks, it actually isn't. Like, as soon as I got to a point where I was even mildly financially wealthy, independent rather, that's one of the first things I began doing, Monty, because not only does it make you feel good when you reward people, but as you say, it has a direct self-benefit. Like, you immediately notice that person remembers your name next time. They even will start doing stuff like remembering what your favorite drink is or what your thing is. As you say, every now and then they'll just slip you one for free, or they'll fuck up the order, so they'll make sure you get a bonus. They'll come before, they'll get all the shit you need. Basically, it's a quality of life upgrade. The problem I have is this, though. I will say another problem America has for tourists is this. If I knew what the system was in every restaurant, Monty, I'd be way more likely to tip. But I'll tell you what, when I've heard those stories at certain franchises where it's like the tip doesn't go to the person I gave it to, it goes in a pool.
Yeah.
If you do that, I'm not going to tip. I'm sorry. Because in that scenario, now I'm paying for like the 9 people who didn't serve me. Like, what am I doing there? You know what I mean? Just make it that I tip the guy who served me. If you do that, I'm cool with it.
Also, I mean, I will admit that I'm one of those also obnoxious Americans that tips when I travel. But here's the reason. Like, people, you know, people sometimes like, oh, you know, you're ruining the economy of some of these, like, you know, because I like traveling in second and third world countries. And so I tend to tip there as well. But again, man, the service I get back, insane. It's insane. And I would rather just get the good service, guys, because I think it is worth it. I think we kind of answered this next question last week, but what is one piece of work, literature, music, art, film, shows that made you cry?
I could come up with another one, because all I said was Gladiator, I guess. So I could try and think of another one. Let me think of what would be a good one. I'll tell you a brilliant movie to be really, it doesn't have to be crime, but emotionally stirring. I think the movie Gattaca is a fucking banger for that.
Oh, I love Gattaca.
The ending's amazing, the middle part, the whole thing with him and a certain figure who's an antagonist. You know, I'm good at not giving the spoilers. I think that's a really emotionally resonant movie for me.
I think a lot of the time, it's hard for me. Like music, I think probably is the most emotionally charged in that way to me. So maybe certain classical pieces or, pieces I really identified with. I don't know if I've like deeply openly wept, but got a little teary.
There's a lot of good, let's be real, there's a lot of good like film scores, like all those Hans Zimmer
yeah.
ones. Obviously he's done some mega ones that are rousing and sort of
John Williams. Yeah,
exactly. There's some bangers.
Is Skip Bayless the GOAT? I mean, yes.
Of his job, almost inarguably, right? Like it was even his competition, Stephen A. Smith's just like a worse version, isn't he? Like, here's the thing, you don't have to what I'll never get is this, Monty. I don't agree with loads of Skip's takes. Like, spoiler, I think Tom Brady's mega overrated. But I actually do love that there is a guy, and what I actually love about Skip Bayless is this, Monty. He's incredibly consistent. He has had some of the same takes for 20 plus years, mate. I respect that. There's way too many people, spoiler, go watch the LCS. Mate, a match happens. Now, all of a sudden, I think the guy who won is the best mid laner. What do you mean? I always thought this other guy. It's garbage, mate. That may as well just be Reddit. They may as well just be Reddit, got a fucking suit and tie on and is now analysing the game for me. I can respect that Skip Bayless actually has like a fucking perspective, which is totally consistent and coherent. It's lasted like 40 years of experience in the real world. He's covered all sports and he's obviously mega fucking polished at doing his job, isn't he? Like, he always delivers his lines, gets his fucking gags off, argues with you. But I think he's mad underrated, mate. The problem people have is they're just triggered by his opinions. You can't handle his opinions, or you just think he's a douchebag, but like, he is very good at his job. If you've ever done broadcast work, he's really good at his job, mate.
Yeah, and also, by all accounts, he's like the nicest guy ever. Everybody says that he's amazing to work with. He's just a super nice guy. He's just very, very entertaining. And the thing is like, what you have to understand is that part of the job of being a sports pundit is the ability to drive interesting conversations. So you can disagree with him, but you're still talking about what he thinks is interesting and what he wants you to talk about. Yes. That's the real power. That's the real power. And
I'll even say, by the way, there's the key I actually think that he's nailed. And I've told this many times, by the way. I am actually inspired by Skip Bayless. I've tried to take things from his game and add them to mine, Monty. And one of the areas I think I succeeded in the same way Skip Bayless uniquely did is, if you noticed, when Skip Bayless enters a topic, the topic now becomes what Skip Bayless thinks about that topic, not what the topic is. Mate, when everyone dunks on me, bro, I have the goats of all time arguing with me about my opinions in public. Like, you have your shitty little opinion about Counter-Strike. The goat comes at my opinions. Like, I win. I've always said this, dude. The reason why Skip's also very smart is because he knows the second you engage with him, he won. It doesn't matter what the fan think. He has won that battle. He's supposed to be a guy just commenting on what happens. Like, the idea you're part of the story is insane. Like, the joke is, I can barely believe it's possible to do, but it does work. It's a very effective media strategy.
Well, also, I just love the fact that people are like, Thorin is irrelevant or Skip is irrelevant. Meanwhile, all these people who are supposed to be relevant feel the need to comment on their comments. So clearly they must be relevant.
That's why I actually give props, even though generally I'm not a big fan of his. I'll actually give props to LeBron. It's actually quite impressive he's never addressed him ever, dude. That's really, if you don't know, that's really hard to do. Because let's be real, Skip Bayless is
LeBron for like 2 decades.
Skip Bayless is not only incredibly relevant, but LeBron himself will know he's been very relevant to the narrative of LeBron's career. The idea you don't eventually snap and say something like that, that takes a lot of fucking like sort of restraint. That's actually props to LeBron on that one, yeah.
Since there's been so much talk about players in ELO Hell this split, what would be your lineup of the 5 most ELO players, Hell players from the spring? How do you think they would do at MSI? Well, I think Scout
is the obvious. Oh, we're going on the whole world, right? Oh, okay.
Yeah. The 5 most ELO Hell players. I mean, Scout and Tarzan, I think, are pretty clearly up there. Viper's clearly up there.
Viper, easy.
Jankos.
Jankos is an easy one, in it. Yeah.
Unfortunately, Tarzan is a better player, I think, than Jankos, so he probably wouldn't get that spot. What about top lane?
Who would I pick for that one?
Yeah, top lane and supports. Kyle was pretty good actually for support. Crisp didn't have a good playoff showing, but Crisp was very good.
I think top lane's probably the hardest. I don't really know if there were any people Elo held in that position. Because, like, for example, by the end, KT was really good, so you can't really say Keegan, can you? Like, they had some pretty good
KT
players on
was
his
good.
team.
Yeah, he almost made MSI as it was, and certainly put up a good showing. Let me look here. Any top laners I think would fit the bill. Rascal maybe to a degree, but
Okay,
it's not like
I don't hate
Rascal had
that. I don't hate that.
yeah,
Though.
Rascal didn't have a great split though. Kana was okay, but not amazing.
I don't think there is one for top lane. I think that's the only role that doesn't stand out to me.
Which graphic novels would you recommend to people not familiar with the medium?
Oh,
okay.
easy.
So this is a great question, guys. Because first off, there's two reasons why this is a great question. First off, I was not into graphic novels until Thorin started mailing me graphic novels. So he actually has already done this literally to me.
And
so
you can just tell me which ones you like that got you into them. So there you go. Which ones would you pick?
and then I got into some of my own as well. But also because we have discussed pretty extensively about doing a classic graphic novel book club for this exact reason, to get people into graphic novels and discuss the history of the medium. I guess I did dabble in graphic novels a little bit when I was like a teenager. Like I was but it was very specific graphic novels. So I was a big fan of the Bone series by Jeff Smith.
All right. Yeah. Like an independent
that
one
was
if people don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, that one was really good, and I really enjoyed that. But then
you must have read like The Sandman or something, right, Monty? Someone must have recommended that.
I read The Sandman in college. I borrowed it from some friends in college and read it there, and I really enjoyed it at the time. I recently reread it and enjoyed it a lot less. I think it's aged very badly. Just as
the problem with that
medium.
in general as a series, Monty, is it's one of those ones. It reminds me a bit of people know Discworld, where if you encounter it when you're a teenager, you're gonna think it's the best shit ever. But it's also very much for teenagers, in my opinion. Like if you've never read any of the literary illusions, you're gonna be like, "This is so out there," but it's actually fairly basic stuff. Like it's well done, but it's basic stuff.
Yeah. It's like pretty good, but I enjoyed it more when I was
understandably
21.
Like I say,
and
if you don't have the world
also,
experience, it's going to blow your mind, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I was also a literature major, and so I hadn't been exposed to Alan Moore at that point in time. I actually had read V for Vendetta in college, but for the most part, like I wasn't as familiar with Alan Moore. And a lot of the Alan Moore stuff I had been exposed to was like the really shitty film version of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, where League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the graphic novel is fucking great and like is super, super interesting. And as somebody who has studied like that period of Victorian era literature, very interesting. His spins on the characters make them very deep and like ethically questionable a lot of the time, which I really enjoyed. But I think a lot of the stuff. I mean, what did you? Obviously, like I had read Watchmen as well. Watchmen is like one of the greatest of all time. Clearly, super incredible. But some of the more fringe Alan Moore stuff that you have sent me was really good, like Promethea. That was surprisingly good. Red Sun. So here's the thing, Thorin. Actually, the only superhero comic I used to read was Superman, where I used to get the individual graphic novels on a weekly basis. It was during that weird time period where they temporarily changed him to like the electricity, like the blue Superman
the 90s
or whatever.
one, yeah. After
Yeah,
he
the
died and
90s
came
one.
back, yeah.
But I had read like Death of Superman, and clearly, like I think the most interesting part of Superman is the thought experiments they do about Superman. So when they do the thought experiment in Red Sun where he crashes in the Soviet Union instead of America is like very fascinating. So that was really good. The Ed Brubaker stuff, so Criminal. That was another one that I've really enjoyed, and I've gotten into some of the other like Ed Brubaker stuff. So it's like film noir. It's like the noir comics.
He had Fatal was another one he did where it was like the Lovecraftian
Yeah, Fatal is
one.
great. Yeah, Fatal
Basically,
is
if
great.
people don't know, one of the reasons I gave Monte a lot
the fade out is great.
The reason I gave Monte a lot of the Ed Brubaker stuff is because in theory it's not superhero comics. It's just like independent style comics where, like, for example, Criminal is just a bunch of criminal / film noir-esque stories of someone who's involved with crime.
Yeah,
it's
like pulp crime.
Yeah.
You know,
so I knew for
stories,
him,
basically.
if he's not like insanely into superheroes, that's like another angle. Because one thing I would say is there's two ways I can answer this question. I can either just give you like the newbies 101. Here are the 10 graphic novels to read.
Yeah, do it.
So it would be like Watchmen, V for Vendetta, Superman Red Son, maybe like fucking, what's it called? Identity Crisis was a really good graphic novel that was a one-off with the JLA characters. Yeah, basically, you could all go, fucking, what do you call it? Dark Knight Returns, the Frank Miller one.
300.
These are all like the classic ones you can go with easily.
I would say if you want to read a self-contained Ed Brubaker story, I really like The Fade Out. That one is great. And then there's like the Jodorowsky stuff, which I also got into. So like Meta Barons, The Incall, Techno Priests, all fucking amazing.
What I'll do is this, I'll give you a little twist though, because the other twist is, what if you're someone like Monte? Like, the reason you were into it is you're not enamored with like Spider-Man as a character, you know, you just want something that's good to read. What I would say is go the route that I did for Monte, like start with stuff that's not about superheroes. So get the criminal stuff. Essentially, you only have to buy one of them. If you like it, you're gonna like it all, but each one in its own way is a semi-self-contained story where there's slight overlaps, but that's more just like for callback purposes. Each one's its own story. I'd also say another good one I like is if you look up the Peter Milligan run on a character called the Human Target. It's just a really interesting premise. Basically, the premise is there's a guy who's a specialist at going undercover as people, but he becomes them to such a degree, he starts losing his own identity within these characters and over-identifying with things about them. And so it's just a very interesting sort of like exploration of identity. Let me think of another good one.
I've been in terms of ones that are still being released. I've been reading Saga, which I've been enjoying. That one's quite famous now because it's won a bunch of awards by Brian Vaughan. But Brian Vaughan is another really good author, and I got into that I think by some books that you had given me as well, like Ex Machina, which is very interesting.
Yes, that's another good one where even though that's partially superheroes, it's sort of about a superhero in a way. If people don't know, Ex Machina basically is not only does it have amazing artwork for a comic, but it's almost more like you could like that's essentially like a TV show, but as a comic book. Like that could be like The West Wing or fucking one of these shows where it has like a 1-2 season run or something. So that's another one where you don't have to be super into comics. It's a totally unique story. It's not some classic character. It's a totally like its own universe, and it's essentially all about politics, but through the lens of a superhero. So it's quite an interesting take. Yeah, there you go. There's some good ones.
Yeah, I would say though, like if you Criminal is good, but if you want just like a self-contained story, I would say that I bought this later, but The Fade Out, which is like a Hollywood film noir, basically, by Brubaker is good, and then obviously Watchmen, V for Vendetta, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I think is if you like Alan Moore, that's where you go. Also, what was the other superhero one that Alan Moore did? Miracle Man.
Yep, that's a pretty good one. That's a pretty old school one. I wouldn't start with that. That's more like if you're into the genre.
That's like you're going down the Alan Moore rabbit hole. That one is really fucking good, but it definitely is not the first one.
It's more akin to if someone hadn't watched movies, like throwing them like a 1950s classic. It could be great, but I don't know if you're prepared with your palate for that one, you know.
And also, I think obviously I'm very biased towards this, but Bone is a very like lighthearted fantasy read that has a surprising amount of depth to it.
I'll give you a really out there one though, which is if you know nothing about comics, but you want to read a really weird premise, there's a comic book called Knights of the Dinner Table, which is about a bunch of people playing D&D, which sounds shit, right? But all I'm going to say is check it out and you'll see what I mean. It's a mad sleep. If you like it, it's insane how good it is.
All right, I'll check that out. I haven't heard of that one. Okay. What career pivots have impressed you the most? I guess in esports. We'll keep it to esports.
I mean, an obvious one to me would be like I think this should count. Like, how about when fucking Jawu just went top lane? and won MSI doing it. That's pretty insane. Imagine that. By the way, leaving the best position in League of Legends to go play top. And then he even did it like the most unique. Remember, he used to play Lucian when everyone else was playing it mid and AD. He was just playing it in Smurf on top of it. And if you go look at and if you go look at the teams of players he was playing with, like, mate, that's just a miracle fucking half a year. How did this guy do it? It's incredible. That's an easy one, which is a game-related one. There's got to be some good esports ones. What would you pick?
I mean, Score also, like his pivot from role
to coach.
His role swap to coach has been very successful. It's like, what's crazy about Score is that it feels like every time he pivots his career, he becomes more successful. That's
right. You keep talking a second.
Right. Another one I have to say, and Thorin and I have agreed on this before in the past, which is that Wolf the caster is one of them as well. Like, I know some people, first off, I think Wolf has gotten a lot better as a caster in League of Legends, particularly this year, and he continues to grow in strength. I know some people have been critical of him, but at the end of the day, he has pivoted multiple times. From all of these different mediums he is still, I think, the only caster in the world who's cast like 3 different genres, FPS, RTS, and MOBA at the kind of like top level. It's really impressive.
Definitely as a color commentator, put it that way. Yeah, exactly.
Really impressive,
as you say.
So I think like he was. I mean, he continues to be really excellent. I really love the way that Wolf does narratives too. I think his research about pro players and their history and their styles and the setups he does around the narratives of their career are among the best of any color caster. So his pivots have consistently been impressive, coming from StarCraft, going to Heroes of the Storm, doing World of Tanks, going to Overwatch, going to League of Legends now, and especially coming into League of Legends, a game with such an extreme history. The fact that he knows the history so well is also very impressive. So yeah, I think he's been great.
I've got some names for you. So I'll go with Cadril. The guy was just going to be known as like a journeyman fucking jobber, jungler / mid. He's become one of the best fucking analysts. He's nailed it. Similarly, Quickshot. If people don't remember, Quickshot's whole gimmick was that he's a caster who knows all the names of the abilities. That's irrelevant to his Quickshot the last 7 years. Like, Quickshot became the main showman of the LEC. And now, if anything, I actually love the way, as far as I can tell, he just intentionally fills the gaps. He doesn't try to make himself the star of the show at all. He kills it. So I think there's a brilliant pivot. Papa Smithy went from being like, I am a super nerd color commentator to I am building successful sports teams. Like, there's almost no overlap there, guys. Just knowing the game isn't enough. Like, you have to have a whole different skill set, how you build it up. And then the last one I had was Henry G. Henry G used to be just like a good source player and became like probably the best fucking color commentator Counter-Strike's ever seen. He was fucking fantastic. And if you don't know, if you're a CSGO fan, but you came along in the latter days, the amount of jokes and in-jokes and references and things that are just his shit is ridiculous. Like, he just changed the whole style of how it was done after that. So there's some good ones.
Yep. If Faker wins another couple of worlds, do you think he would have a legitimate case for being the GOAT across all esports? If not, who would still be on par or above? I mean, he's certainly in the conversation.
He's already in that convo anyway. He might be number 1 anyway. Could already be number 1.
Flash, Simple. Who else would you add?
I mean, it's not that many more people, right? Because here's the issue. Beyond that, like, what other even games deserve to be in there? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because the problem that you run into is a game has to be at a large enough scale to be really hyper competitive. So even though there are some Quake players that are still enduring, right? The scene is so small that it's hard to. We just don't know if there was more competition, whether that would produce greater players, which is, I think, one of the issues. And the thing that League has going for it is simply the fact that it's the most played PC game in the world. So we know the competition is very fierce.
Oh, I guess just for the sake of completion, if I'm going to add those names, you should also probably throw in like Daigo. It's a classic one, right? You know, a few of those people can go on the list if they want.
In your opinions, where does Impact fit in the LCS GOAT discussion? Even ignoring his pre-LCS performances, he has some of the better accomplishments in LCS. The problem is that he's never been the carry on the team, right?
By definition, he can't be number 1, can he? Because here's the problem, right? If you recruit the actual best player in the LCS, it's probably Bjergsen, right? If you recruit Bjergsen, Monte, and I recruit Impact, you've got the starting of an amazing team. I haven't got a team yet. Because who's Impact going to help? Who's he going to weak side and help carry the game? So if you can, the problem with that is this: all you're doing there, my dude, is going. But Ron Harper won 3 titles with the Bulls. He must be in the top list. He wouldn't even be on the list because he didn't win the titles. Is our point. So even though, look, if you want to go by top laners, he's certainly one of the best. He's not even close to the GOAT of the LCS because, as Monte said, when was he ever the carry? When was he ever the man? Because think about it logically. If I spin it the other way around, if he really is the GOAT of the LCS, then every LCS team used him incorrectly. You can have that as a take if you want, but I don't know what the point would be, you know.
Let's see here. Having watched the Swiss system in previous CSGO RMRs and this Paris RMR, just how bad will the upsets in BO1 fuck the LoL World Championship seeding? The seeding in CSGO is sickening. Should we be not worried about the Asian teams, especially LPL and BO1s will fuck the bracket even more? I mean, yes, that's the whole problem is that in CSGO, there's constant international competition. And even then the seeding is shit. When we don't have, when it's been 5 months since the last international tournament, how can you possibly seed Swiss? This is the fundamental issue. I mean, the format is bad for Worlds. It's bad in CSGO, and it's going to be even worse for Worlds for the same reasons.
Problem is, though, Monte, you'll never beat morons. So you know the same morons who told you for 5 years, as if none of us have eyes, by the way, like, but Monte, if the same team made that play in LCK, you would praise it. It's like, the eye test just doesn't check out on that at all. The same idiot who thinks that. There was a thread on the CSGO sub the other day, Monte, that was the opposite conclusion of what you would take from the way that format works. It said the fact that these Swiss systems always yield these upsets proves that actually, like, essentially tier 1 and tier 2 CS are just very close together in ability level. So you can't beat a moron. You cannot beat a moron because a moron, remember, has a shit brain. So no matter what inputs you put in, their brain never actually can analyze it. So to an idiot, yes, that's correct. They must just be better. And what we actually found out, Monte, even though this is the dumbest take ever, is that the whole time, the only reason FaZe was winning all those tournaments is because Bad News Eagles don't make the semi-finals of all those events. If they had, the real best team would have won it all and had the era, wouldn't they? So essentially, to bring it back to League, luckily, here's the good news. I'll give you the good news first, guys. You almost couldn't make a worse system to fuck things up with upsets than round robin best of 1, which is what we previously had. So it's still better than that, in my opinion. But yes, there will absolutely be some teams. Are you ready? I'll give you the prediction right now. You insert the team. Obviously, I won't say which one it'll be. Do it like Mad Lib style. There will be 2 teams at the end of this Worlds that will go like this. One team is really good, but didn't make it because they got the craziest draw of all time. They really did play a number 2 seed from China into a match with, like, inexplicably some team from Korea lost, and they played them next, and then they played like the best team from Europe, and at the end you're like, how the fuck were you meant to get out? And there'll be another team, are you ready, who does get out of Swiss, and they'll have locked in the craziest one of all time. They'll have played PCS number 1, absolute worst Korean team, into like number 3 seed from Europe. Like, somehow that'll happen, right? And when this happens, it's the contrast between the 2 people's paths that will make you go, what a silly format this is. Like, you won't play the same game, sort of. Just the nature of Swiss system, I'm afraid. I don't really know how you fix it.
The problem with League of Legends,
as you say, you cannot seed. It's impossible.
Yeah, you can't.
Essentially, if you want to seed, it will by definition be absurdly biased because you'll just have to pick someone that'll have to be their opinion. You know,
I think why we're so upset about the Swiss and the seeding issues is that in a game like League of Legends with so few international tournaments, you just have to have very good formats so that you can ensure that the best teams advance. And so when we have all these random and arbitrary formats that create by their very nature upsets, and we know they don't work because we've already seen it done in a region, in a game where it has a better chance of working than it does in League of Legends, which is CSGO, we're just very down on it. I mean, it's going to be completely fucked. The Swiss system is going to completely fuck Worlds. We know it's true. Riot has no clue what they're doing in terms of format. They lucked into a good format with MSI. Hopefully they will learn, but it took 10 years for them to change the World's format, so let's not hold out a lot of hope. They are just fucking terrible at formats. There's always another game, and you both were here before League and will certainly outlast it. But given that you've dedicated over a decade to it, but when League is gone, do you think you will look back fondly upon it? I will. I mean, there have been some really great moments in League of Legends, and even though I like the game less than I like Brood War as a game, I like the game less than I like CS:GO as a game. The scale of the game and the large player base and the competition and the players have made it a very compelling esport in many ways.
I don't know what the game would have to think negatively of. It's been all right. I mean, the
Yeah.
esports side's been pretty cool. It's just mainly all the stupid drama that ruined it for me. But
It's
aside
not a
from that,
bad
it's all
game.
good.
It's just not the best game, but it does have the most robust international circuit, so it has a lot going for it. I enjoyed it. Did Riot force the LoL meta to make it easier to follow the esport? Was it a good decision? It was an excellent decision. I am a huge fan of forcing. When we talk about forcing the meta, we're talking about having positions, top jungle, mid, ADC, and support. Yes, because it allows people to play the game and learn a role within the game, just like a traditional sport would. You have a discrete set of responsibilities and a fundamental game state that you operate off of, which is good for both players and for the professional scene because it makes it a lot easier to discuss and compare players according to their roles. It was a great idea. It is the fucking best idea. And I'm telling you, because I played LoL prior to this and it was a lot worse. I was also hugely in favor of Overwatch doing role lock. You have any thoughts?
I don't really care about that angle. It's whatever.
That's fair. Who is your favorite player to watch from LCK and LPL history and why? Well, for me, it's LCK. It's Score, as we've discussed actually many times in this comment section already. For LPL, it's probably Rookie, just because of his exceptional level of play, the variety of champions that he has, and his insane consistent level.
The thing is, I won't actually pick Flame, my old picks. That was a long time ago. He only played a couple of years, played like 2.5 years or something in OGN. So I would actually say it probably Smeb, because I just thought, like, first of all, fabulous career, very long career. But I also just thought, like, what I liked about the way he played top lane was it wasn't just like brute force. There was like a level of finesse and like there was like an intelligence to how Smeb played. So I just enjoyed watching him and all his teams.
Oh, yeah.
And was it LPL was the other one?
Yep.
It's got to be Rookie for that, hasn't it?
Right.
I always know who watched LPL and who didn't. If you just think like he's just whatever, it's like he was so fucking unbelievable at his prime. It was mental.
Who are your favorite League of Legends players of all time? Additionally, if time allows, who are your favorite players based on personality? Well, I've said many times, Score is my favorite LoL player of all time. Loved Insect too. He really innovated the jungle. Loved Mad Life, innovated the support position. Mata, another player who I really enjoy. Who are your favorite players based on personality? I mean, Imp was pretty fucking funny, I have to say. Like, I enjoyed the kind of like villain arc that Imp had. Maknoon was another one who was very entertaining in terms of his personality. Huni, obviously, not obviously, but Huni, I think, is one of my favorite players based on personality. Doublelift to a certain degree.
I think Doublelift's personality is mad overrated, mate.
I think he's pretty entertaining. But anyway, who do you like?
Yeah, it's more other people's response to him that's entertaining. He's very rarely actually funny, mate. Just what he does is he's a clown. He says and does silly things, and then it's people's response that's really funny. Like another player jumps in and wrecks him or beats him in the game. Half of his shit doesn't even work on its own. I would say personality is the main angle I'm going to do here. People know my favorite players. The two I'm going to pick out, I'm going to pick two Western ones. I think these guys are in a class of their own. It's got to be Diamond Prox. Right. I always say this. I could tell when Diamond Prox's English got better over the years because I actually realized he was saying straight fire shit from the beginning. It's just that we had like bad translators or people were doing it very simplistic or they weren't capturing the essence of it. Once he became super fluent, he's just a mega interesting guy. Like his shit talking, he's so cerebral. And then the obvious modern day one's Perks. Mate, Perks is what people think Doublelift is. This guy's shit talks amazing. He can self-deprecate. He like laughs when it's like a game that he clearly cares about, but he's trying to keep himself back on track. He like centers the team. This guy's the fucking ultimate personality guy for me. Because he also was a really great player, so just kills it.
Did Bjergsen taint his legacy with his comeback? Nah. I mean, I don't really think like Michael Jordan tainted his legacy by coming back to the Wizards. You know what I mean?
People believe that though, Monte. Like people really do think he should have just retired on the last championship. But I actually think the same thing as you. What you did is set in stone. Like Bjergsen playing now doesn't change how amazing he was in season 5 or season 7 or season. at the end of the day, what he did, so no, it doesn't taint your reputation in that sense. I would just say this, like Michael Jordan, what it doesn't allow, and this is why I'm glad they do keep playing Monte, is it doesn't allow the annoying Michael Jordan or Bjergsen fan, who if these motherfuckers did leave on a championship, would act like they could play now and be the best. That guy, I'm glad, can never make that case, because you've seen it isn't true. Like, if Bjergsen retired Monte at the end of, let's say, like season 9, when he was still really good, people would act like he never would have had a bad split ever. He'd always have been the best. He'd have smurfed. So I'm glad we actually got to see that. You know what? I actually think the thing about Bjergsen's career is this. His career is amazing for the first like 4 or 5 years. And man, these last 3 or 4 are just so whack. The last 3 or 4 are just whack. Because remember, it's a bunch of years. It was the coach year, then the team liquidator, and now. Like, that looked pretty bad to me. That looked pretty bad. But it doesn't affect how great he was. He's still the GOAT of LCS. It's all good.
All right. Thorin recently made a comment, made an offhand remark. Rookie needs to be better at managing his career. What controller influences would an S tier player have over roster formation when joining it in an organization? If they do control or influence the process, how is it done? I mean, they can set parameters for joining. Oftentimes they say you have to go get this player. We want to play together. It happens in the NBA too, right? Like a player's like, I will join your team, but also you need to go get this guy because we want to play together. I don't know how much control Rookie has in particular, but it does happen in League of Legends. It does happen in League of Legends. Like, I don't think Carzzy would have been on the last iteration of Vitality had Perks not wanted Carzzy. Let's just put it that way. Is Zeus officially a choker? It's kind of looking like yes.
Hard to argue against. All I'd say is this. If he isn't, then what does a choker look like? You know, that's the obvious question, right?
All signs point to yes. Who are your top 3 GOAT esports orgs? Well, T1.
Orgs.
Yeah, T1 has to be one because they've been relevant in the most prestigious and successful team in the last 20 years of esports across multiple titles. They have a legacy of excellence. Here's a sleeper one for you. MVP. Quietly, no, seriously, probably one of the best orgs at scouting talent in League of Legends.
Yeah, but you mean relative to like expectations. He means that of all time, like they're not the GOAT. Like if you want to do budget roster, I'll give you that angle. But like he just did say GOAT orgs, you know.
I mean, they did. I mean, think about MVP, for example. They were the ones who created the MVP Black Heroes of the Storm roster that went on the kind of unprecedented run. They were the core. They basically were winning titles with the core of the Samsung white and blue rosters. I mean, MVP Ozone did actually pull off that upset in the finals against Blaze. They were extremely good in StarCraft as well. I think they were very good.
No, but here's the problem.
Exceeding expectations.
That's like 3 games, and one of them was Heroes of the Storm. Like, mate, Fnatic alone's got them fucking gapped. They're covered already. Fnatic's had like think about how many years. By the way, just because they're Western Org guys, they've had the best Counter-Strike team in CS:GO and 1%. They've had Quake player start. They've had everything. So, like, by the way, this is actually one area where Western Orgs can hella match up. If you want to take
as well.
Liquid, G2, if you go old school, SK Gaming, all these orgs have had some of the greatest champions of all time.
Yeah, I mean C9 had a year where, you know, they were winning they won, like, they got top 4 at Worlds, won the CS major and won Overwatch League all in the same year. That was pretty impressive. Yeah, so I mean the Western orgs actually generally have held up relatively well, I would say. Especially since some of them actually do have 2 decades plus of history right now. All right, guys. We're not ranking the Disney princesses from best to worst character. We're not doing that one. Where does Zven rank in the Western GOAT conversation? Not very high.
These combos kill me, mate. They just kill me. Right. Here's the thing. Look, you're right in one sense. The one area I'll give you all that you've nailed is when someone wins that many championships, you should at least ask the question, especially if you're a casual fan. Like if someone goes to 2 regions, Montes, and wins like 4 titles here, 3 titles here, whatever, that's very impressive. And role swap. The problem is, it's like the Impact one earlier. If I ever looked at these teams, was Zven ever the best player? Maybe like 1 or 2 G2 titles or something max, but even then you had Perks, you had, so like that's the problem is he was essentially like part of the gang. He wasn't the main guy on most of the teams. The problem.
You are given an LEC slot by Riot. What name do you choose for your team? What style of logo do you create your team? Do you have any? I mean, I would try and actually activate a like have an actual European flair. What I never understood about G2 was like this samurai branding that they never really did anything with. Just seems kind of wacky. I think you can do, there's so much cool shit you could do with classic, if you were doing like a British team, you could do like a naval theme or something like that if you were trying to activate.
I'll give you a good one. You do like a King Arthur theme or something.
Oh yeah, that'd be rad. Nobody.
You know what I mean?
What's crazy is nobody's doing like a
it's silly, isn't it?
theme.
Yeah.
Like, how does that not exist in Europe?
Like imagine having a team,
weird.
just call it like Excalibur or something, and have like a fucking whole theme, and could use all the. Yeah, it could be awesome.
I mean, obviously, I love this shit because that's what I did with Renegades and like the whole cowboy theme, and I tried to make it really unique in the space, and also have, my thing with Renegades was I wanted people to be able to like dress up and wear the bandanas and like actually identify with the team, which actually was one of the more successful parts of that roster or of that branding and the team as a whole. And so I would think that you could do a lot of really fun thematic shit if you actually had a strong identity. But instead, we have Koi, the fish brand, and we have Gamers 2 Samurai, which God knows where that came from. They don't even lean into the samurai thing, which is disappointing. I think there's a lot of cool shit that you could do there. Their brand is very strong, but it's not because of the imagery. Right.
Also, I will say that thing that Carlos used to always say, that sounds like it makes sense, but if you ever examine it, Monty, what is it? When he would always say that line, he would go, but at Ye2, because he never said G2, he said, at Ye2, we are samurai. And it's not about how many times you fall down. It's about getting back up. No, that's Rocky. That's nothing to do with samurai. Samurais have nothing to do with getting knocked. First of all, you're thinking of Chumbawamba, I get knocked down and I get back up again. A great song from the 90s. And you're also thinking of Rocky, the movie Rocky. Like, come on, Rock, get up, you cocksucker. Like, what does that have to do with samurais, though? That's the one part I never understood about, like, his attempt at the market. I'm like, I'm pretty sure samurais don't do that, actually, Carlos.
I think in general, the visual identity with actual brand theming has been lost in the sauce in esports. It's been really bad.
The only one that inadvertently nailed it was obviously Reginald and Team Solo Mid. Like, fair play. I'll give them that one. They did accidentally backdoor that one.
T1 has lost 3 finals in a row where they were massive favorites to win. False. They were not massive favorites to win in 3 finals ago in summer. They were favorites in MSI Worlds and this split, but they were not favorites in summer of last year. So that's just not right. Do you think the fact that T1 lost MSI finals in Korea versus RNG, who wasn't in the arena, had effect on T1's mental? God only knows. I don't think that in particular.
Yeah.
I do think that they clearly have a preparation and mentality issue.
I do also think, by the way, we touched on it earlier, but one of the worst things about that final is it almost did look like they themselves bought the narrative of like, the bin guy's just shit, actually. And they just gave him the dream. Like, if people don't remember, Gwen was so strong in that tournament, and they not only gave him it, but if you ever saw the LPL, you knew he was good. Like, he just murked them in that final, mate.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous, wasn't it?
Yay, arguably the best player in Valorant, recently signed with Disguised Toast outside of the franchise leagues after being dropped by C9. Are there any examples in other team sports where one of the best players is, for whatever reason, without a team and or playing in a team way below the level they should be at? Yankos?
Here's the thing. I mean, you can do that one, yeah. There's not many real examples of it because obviously historically, like, people tend to identify talent. The closest I can come is this didn't end up officially happening, but I can tell you behind the scenes it was going to happen. Actually, like a year before, Team Liquid got really good in CSGO and had that lineup that was like second to Astralis, then had the like Grand Slam. Their best player ever, Elise, got kicked out of the team privately and was actually going to, because the Cloud9 didn't want him, believe it or not, was going to end up playing with the match fixing players that were all banned from majors like Steel and fucking Dazed. And he was going to have to play with those guys. That was who was left. But luckily for him, like behind the scenes, it just sort of got fixed and he came back in the Team Liquid and they never even acknowledged that he was going to get booted and all this happened. And all the fans tried to pretend like I made it up, but it actually is true. That was going to happen. So it's very rare ever in history something like that happens though.
Is there any saving those that still believe that GenG's win isn't legitimate because T1 only lost in the final and didn't get a big enough advantage without a bracket reset?
Joke. Right, okay.
Or like the going 1-0 up in a final. I'll explain this to you guys again. It's not possible to do a bracket reset. You would have to rent the arena for multiple days. You don't want a final, even if it's a best of 7 with a game advantage to the upper bracket team, because nobody likes a final that ends in a tie. You do not want to see a 3-3 final where T1 wins. That fucking sucks, okay? So no, we don't want that. Here's an idea for you. How about this? The team that it comes from the upper bracket obviously gets side selection in game number 1. What if they also got guaranteed side selection in game number 5?
That's a pretty good one.
Would you be less mad then? I think that's fair, because if, like, honestly, if they can't make it to 5 games, do they deserve that advantage? Yes. But if they do make it to 5 games, maybe you give them a little edge. Maybe you give them a little edge.
I also noticed immediately why you put it on game 5, because you purposely made it so you can still beat them and they don't necessarily activate it. But if they also let it go all the way to game 5 at that point in time, like, fair play, they get an edge again. I think. But the key thing, notice what Monte's done is what I like when you give an advantage. You get an advantage. Getting one game is an advantage. You just got a game, mate. Like, you gave them the whole game. Advantage is you have a better chance to win the game. I like it like that, what you're saying. Like, when essentially, if I'm still twice as good as you, I still win that series 3-0. Like, it's all good. I don't ever have to worry about that. Your advantage, right. I'm still win. So yeah.
I mean, and if you get dumpstered 3-0, you kind of fucking deserve to lose, right? Like, I don't think you could have watched the LCK final. Like, let's be real. Do you think that if that series was run back the next day that GenG would have lost? Like, GenG looked way better, you know, by the time the finals rolled around. And the first best of 5 was, in my opinion, even though GenG lost, the first best of 5 between T1 and GenG was a much closer series than the one in the finals. So it's just not feasible. I've said this before. The best thing we could do is have a best of 3 of best of 5s. That's what I would like to see, is over like 3 days with like a day off in between. So the teams can prepare, and then so you play one best of 5, day off, another best of 5, day off, another best of 5. I would like to see that format, but economically, it's not feasible in the industry right now to rent a stadium for 3 days when one of those days you might not even use. Okay, so we just can't do it. There will be better formats in the future. However, providing massive advantages will taint the finals really, really badly, and you guys just don't want that. So, like I said, I would be open to considering the team that comes from the upper bracket gets side selection no matter what in game 5 of the series. I think that's an interesting compromise to make. Remember, they already have to play fewer games, and they get side selection in the first game of the series, which is an inherent advantage as it is. And no, there is no saving people. They are morons. They do not understand formats. They do not understand the business or limitations of the industry. Okay? So, like, pick which one you don't understand. You don't know how formats work. You don't know what is possible at the current time. You are applying nonsense from the fighting game community that doesn't work in MOBAs or RTS or FPS games that have, it's not that a best of 7 or a best of 5 in the FGC can take 30 minutes to finish or 45 minutes to finish. These are 5+ hour series potentially. And so it isn't possible to play more games, guys. It's not.
If people don't know, by the way, it's the same in things like Quake. Again, like a duel's 10 minutes. So it's not an hour, like, 45 minutes. So that's the part they're mistaken when they go in between the games, for sure.
And also, it's like the margin for error in a best of 7 for a fighting game is much lower. Like, you have a lot of opportunities in a game of Counter-Strike or a game of League of Legends to come back. Like, there's a lot of give and take there. There are literal rubber band mechanics in both of the games. Like, actually, you just get more money when you lose in Counter-Strike, and you actually have bounties and stuff in League of Legends. Like, there are literal comeback mechanics that you can execute on. What is your favorite garnish to add to your own dishes at home? Being Mexican, I'm biased adding lime to almost anything. I mean, cilantro and lime are always great, man. Also, fish sauce. That's one of my favorites. I add fish sauce to a lot of dishes, like chili, that you would not consider fish sauce in. Delicious.
The most obvious, it's boring, but the most obvious one is I add loads of salt to almost anything I eat. I find salt brings out flavor. It's just the shit, isn't it?
Yep. Is the LCK the worst league cast from the 4 major regions? Get out of here, guys. Like, look, I don't think the cast in the finals was as good as many of the games in the regular
What are
season.
they hating on though? What do they hate on in LCK?
So there was a lot of complaints that the finals cast was very T1 biased, and the way that it was framed was kind of disrespectful to GenG, which I do agree with, sort of. It wasn't the strongest cast that I've heard those guys do, that's for sure. But I honestly think that, you know, the LCK cast has been really good this year as a whole. Like, I think that was an off day, but it wasn't atrocious. And I think that Wolf has really leveled up consistently in terms of his knowledge. Chronicler is good. Atlas and Valdez are both very fun play-by-plays. The banter is really fun to listen to, and I enjoy the LCK.
I think
cast.
Atlas is really good, man. I love that
Atlas
guy.
is one of the best in the world. I mean, Atlas is probably a top 2 play-by-play caster in League of Legends. Like, I think it's him and Flowers.
Yes.
And so you pick which one you like more. So I think you know, I've enjoyed Ox. I think Ox is a good caster. I'm looking forward to him being more integrated. But even the desk with like Huni and Ox has been interesting and entertaining. So I don't know, man. I really think that is a very weird take. Very weird take. Especially because, like, dude, the LCS cast, like, come on.
Guys, literally, we already made fun of it where, like, you can't tell, is Latigris doing a basic medical, like, blood extraction or actually casting a game?
Like, you know? Yeah, I mean, like, not to say that the lows of the LCS have been really fucking low, guys.
I mean, I can't lie, though. If I was actually having blood drawn for donation purposes, I would want Latigris to cast, Gabby Durden to cast like that. Like, and the blood coming into the thing, it's got the air bubble there, sure not to inject that back in. That'd be amazing. I think I'd be so hyped.
I mean, there's a reason why we only saw 3 casters on LCS for both of the matches in the finals weekend. They didn't even include.
Here's the thing, though, Monte. Do you know how I know that deep down, Latigris, now aka Gabby Durden, is a true League of Legends fan, though? Because she even imagines dragons.
There you go. That's a good one.
Not bad. That wasn't bad. She did literally imagine a dragon got killed, guys. I didn't do that.
You are tasked to choose esports games to create an endurance play akin to an Ironman challenge. What are your 3 choices and why in that particular order? I mean, it has to be Brood War and Quake. Have to be 2 of those for sure. Brood
Especially
War,
for
Quake.
The suffering element of how hard they are to play and how good a slog it would be. Yeah, exactly.
Brood War and Quake. And the problem is you can't choose a team game because it's an Iron Man, right? So we have to choose another 1v1 game. Is there a 1v1 game in a different genre? Problem is most of the 1v1s are RTS or FPS.
It's true, actually. What other games even are there in 1v1? Oh, you could do like
a fighting game. It'd have to be a fighting game.
Oh, you could do like pick whatever the hardest Street Fighter was. I don't know what is it, like
Street Fighter 2?
One of those ones. Yeah, one of the old school ones, probably.
Smash is also very difficult. Like Smash Melee would be really challenging. So either Street Fighter 2, I think, or Smash Melee. So, yeah.
What's the joke is you could make it the least satisfying Iron Man competition ever, because here's what could happen. Right, you start out 5 hours of playing Quake, duels back and forth. You've got to know the maps, the timings, Monte. You've got to understand the duel dynamics. Then you switch over Brood War. You've got to understand not just like micro, but the maps, the terrain, production. Like, so you switch over, you're playing Smash Brothers. You're almost at the end of it all, and Nintendo shuts the whole event down.
you know who actually
for the esports fans there.
You know who might actually win this is Mango. Like, crazily enough, Mango's actually like a very good Counter-Strike player.
Oh, right.
Surprisingly. Okay. He is a super good, just like general gamer. I feel like people who have very good skills, like surprisingly good skills, like Forgiven or Mango across different genres, would do very well in this. It'd be really fun to see this actually played out. When assembling a LoL super team, do you value nurturing individual skills and strengths or prefer to trim them down in order to achieve a more cohesive play style in the team?
Say the first part again, will you?
So when you assemble a super team, do you value nurturing individual skills and strengths or prefer to trim them down in order to achieve a more cohesive play style in the team? I think here's the analogy. I think you have to, if you're bringing a super team together, you have to make sure you get the basics down first. So I would agree on a play style where you can actually just win consistently by putting people in more limited roles. And then you can play jazz after that, right? But you have to understand how to play together first. So I would say you have to trim them down first, because otherwise you end up with the Team Liquid problem last year, where technically all these players can play all these champions, but they never actually learn how to play them together. And they're trying to play all these different win conditions simultaneously or like match to match. So I think you have to start with a kind of more like inside the box before you can think outside the box.
I mean, the main problem with the question, I think, is this, is like, you can't really, when you make the team, know how they'll fit together. So like most of the time in the off season, you are just trying to sign the best players, and then you figure out afterwards what you can do with it. To me, it's a bit like that thing that people always talk about in the NFL, where they try and talk like you should always draft like exactly what you need on your team. But that's actually not a very good approach. Like in general, as far as I can tell, you should just draft the best player available at that spot and either trade them or just rework the team. Like it usually just makes sense to find that. So in my opinion, especially in League of Legends, as that's the show we're talking about, I don't think it's a game you can truly like know how people fit together. I would just try and sign good players, and then I do what you're talking about. I obviously then pare it down, streamline it a bit. This person's weak side, they play through it. You just do that as a natural process of having a team anyway when you know your personnel, right?
Yep. Okay, final question. How do you manage making a piece of content and afterwards thinking, here's an interesting point I forgot, or here's a better way I could have framed this point to punch harder? The Japanese philosophy style of Kaizen doesn't apply to modern day content release structure, where it doesn't make sense to remake contents when the points are refined later on. I would say that if you feel like you missed something, then I would go back to why you missed it. And oftentimes it's because you weren't thinking about the right aspects or the most impactful aspects, or how the aspects of a topic might have changed. So for example, like, was there a meta shift that caused a role to be more important, which then caused you to undervalue that role potentially because you didn't place enough importance on that meta shift, or you didn't notice it, or you didn't put enough weight in it, in which case you can just refine that point moving forward. And oftentimes, because there's a continuous discussion about the evolution of teams, you actually can, with a new piece of content, go back and make that point again. I don't think it's like you put the content out and then you never talk about that, because the world that we operate in week to week is very dynamic. So you can always go back and just kind of like reference the history again. So I'm not sure I think that's as much of an issue as this question makes it out to be.
I would just say it is annoying if you do it like if it's supposed to be like a heavy hit, like a massive article or a video, and then you forget like one piece of context or one fucking ref. Obviously that sucks, but like you say, luckily in our careers, it's not like we're making movies where everything's an enormous budget. You got one chance. Like I have a million talk shows. I can even fucking do a bunch of tweets about it. I can do, like you say, you just wait long enough, you can reformulate the content and essentially do a rerun anyway. Right. There's a bunch of angles.
And I think too, because especially us who are doing all these talk shows these days, and because we have to keep our points fresh between shows, like we don't want to keep bringing up the same thing on shows over and over and over again, is that if I miss something or I think about another angle I want to talk about it, fortunately, I just have another talk show where I can dive into that angle instead and make it interesting for the listener, so it's not the same content that you hear over and over and over again. So I think that's pretty. Luckily, there's like a redundancy built into the system right now where that's possible. It is a bummer sometimes, but honestly, I think you just take those learnings and you say like, oh, well, here's why. You just have to identify why you missed it. And then if you apply that framework to your next analysis, hopefully you won't miss it for the same reasons again. So it really is just a growth of entertainment and analysis, as it were, right? And oftentimes if there's a joke, you just wait for the opportunity to say that joke comes around again, and then you've got it like loaded in the chamber, right? Okay, guys. That is our last question. Got through all of them for this week. We will be back next week. However, it will not be on Tuesday the 18th. It will be on Thursday the 20th. So a little bit late, but we will obviously be talking about LEC and LPL. By that time, yeah, should be a lot to talk about with the LPL finals going on and catching up to that point. So We will see you on 420. And please remember to send in your cringe esports content on Twitter as we requested at the top of this show. And we'll record that content this weekend for you guys. Thanks a lot. See you then.